Are still at home for the rest of the week, so nothing much to worry about, but we'll be giving you more updates, especially on the flood situation. This is the Morning Cafe. My name is Fred Indimule. Karibu sana.
And I'm usually Stanley Jarungita. Though yesterday, Fred, there are some children who actually had reported to schools. Imagine if you're staying in your school in 5 different other counties at 4 different counties ahead. So there's some principals who decided, well, let some of these children just stay in school for this entire week to see how things would be.
They're torn in between sending the children back on the road, putting them at risk of the flood situation as well.
Oh, yes.
So, yes, this is part of what we'll be discussing this morning. And a quick look at the dailies. Yes, deluge of death. That's a big headline on the Standard this morning. I think that's the only thing on the front page of the Standard. This is the biggest story, and I wonder if any other daily, and we'll be looking at them, can actually go for any other story, and why you would do that.
There is. We'll be getting to that.
This is the Standard this morning. The Daily Nation, Black Monday, because it was a really Black Monday, especially with what happened in Mai Mahiu. More than 40 people reportedly dead, and others still missing.
Oh, yes. On to the next, kwenye gazeti la Taifa Leo, the same story, mafuriko ya mauti. And I remember last week you saying we really need to have the Kenyan photographers just giving an bird's view of an aerial view of what is actually happening. And there we have it, of the situation in Mai Mahiu yesterday. On Business Daily.
Kenya cancels France-backed Mau Summit toll highway contract. This is a big discussion. This is where this road from Rironi all the way to Mau Summit, it keeps getting traffic. It's there. And then again, a mention of the flood situation, destruction, and this is somewhere in Kitale, a photo there on the front page of the Business Daily. At least a mention of the flood situation. Floods kill 91. That's People Daily on the front page. Once again, the only story.
Oh, yes.
The only other story is schools reopening and some students who did not get the...
Oh, yes. And it is also reflected on the same, and it is intertwined. This numbers, though, it is keen to note that as much as we're reporting to you 91, as People Daily reports it, today we'll be having Kenya Met Department giving us some new data on the same.
On TV47 later at night, Daily report.
And also at 3 p.m. they'll be giving a press conference on the same. Oh, yes. Yesterday, George Marika was talking to the Met services here.
Okay.
And that is on the People Daily. So you're talking about...
The story is actually about floods, but then the Star has this for you.
Oh, yes. They're going with a whole different... Let's just zoom in for you and see what they say. Doomed chopper propeller linked to Ogola's death.
And you wonder why they would go with this story on the... Okay, it's Tuesday. It's Tuesday. Because no mention of floods anywhere on the front page. The other story is ODM bigwigs seek to influence grassroots elections. Why they decided not to have any mention of the flood situation, we do not get. But hey, that's a star for you. But
then hopefully it is insert pages.
I think most of the inside is consumed by the MyGov. It is Tuesday and it's a star. In Uganda, Besigye favored to lead new party. That's the front page of the Daily Monitor.
Oh, yes.
And they're also talking about a new bridge to spur trade. I thought it had something to do with the flood situation, but no. It's just an image of new infrastructure in Uganda this morning.
Though it definitely seems that the floods are really ravaging Kenya as well as Tanzania, not as much as in Uganda.
Uganda, I think they're simply just not talking much about it.
Yes.
But I don't think they've really escaped much.
Okay. Still in Uganda, Museveni calls for reforms at World Bank. And interestingly,
he actually did that in Kenya, yes.
Oh, yes. They have a photo of a beloved building that has no title deed, the land that it sits on. That is the Kenyatta International Convention Center. Right. Let's get into, they're actually mentioning about the whole Muhoozi celebrating 50 years.
Okay.
And you're still wondering, how is Muhoozi 50 years?
He looks, let me not say.
And his mannerisms. Into Tanzania?
Gazeti la Mwananchi, Kikokotoo balaa, kigogo wa zamani wa TUKTA afichua makubaliano Kikokotoo yalivyokuwa, aipa lawama serikali, vigogo wa TUKTA akipigia msumari vyama 19 kuliamsha. Still talking about the union, workers' rights and workers' unions debate ahead of tomorrow's Labor Day celebrations, which will be marked worldwide. It is a big discussion in Tanzania. Go back to Mwananchi because they still have mention of flooding on the front page. Sababu mbinu kudhibiti tope la maporomoko, still on the front page there. So it's still a big discussion point. All right.
And finally, President William Ruto is quoted on the Citizen that is in Tanzania. This has to do with African leaders outline priorities for rich nations and World Bank to focus on. Different quotes by various leaders, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, as well as Ethiopia.
All right, those are the dailies this morning. A quick look at the traffic situation now, and an overview of the main tributaries into Nairobi. And nothing much to report on the major highways, but now let's get closer to the Nairobi CBD. And we start off with Mombasa Road, and yes, all the way as far back as Manzoni, coming all the way past Manyata, bit of a slowdown there at Manyata, but after that, getting into Mlolongo, all the way past Syokimau into town, nothing much to report about. It's smooth flowing traffic. We take a look at Langata Road as well. And Langata Road is looking good, past Bomas of Kenya, all the way into town. Yes, let me put it this way. A bit of a slowdown here, just before you get to the T-Mall roundabout, but it's on the other side heading away from T-Mall roundabout. I don't know why, but probably an incident, early morning incident on the road, which is slowing down that section.
It's always
something could have happened. Yes, something may have happened on this section of the road. There's a bit of red. So if you're leaving opposite, right next to the Wilson Airport, if you're leaving towards Karen, there's a bit of a slowdown there.
Because typically it's always yellow on normal days.
Yes. On Gong Road, all the way past the bypass and Gong Road, past the Junction Mall, nothing much to report about. All the way to the City Mortuary roundabout, the road is looking smooth this morning. So yes, Ngong Road, so far so good. Let me take a look at the other major tributary into town, and that's Wayakiwe. And Wayakiwe we go as far back as Kino. Okay.
Uthiru?
A bit of a slowdown at Gitaru, and this is to be expected without interchange. I think there's still repairs going on. A lot of trucks using this area. So yes, a bit of a slowdown there. But after that, past Kino, past Uthiru, past Loresho Estate and Kangemi, ABC, all the way into town. It's looking good. So from that direction, nothing much to report about. Thika Road as well. Yes, past the Ruiru, bits and pieces of slow traffic, but nothing to worry about. Okay, once you get here at Kasarani, there's a section just before Kasarani where there's a bit of a slowdown. That's past Githurai before you get to the Roysambu interchange. So yes,
the underpass just getting into Roysambu, and also the roundabout heading to Roysambu.
Okay, we would like to know what's happening on that section of the road. If at all there's any incident, kindly let us know through our social media at TV47 News or on Facebook TV47 Kenya. Yes, it could be anything. Last time we saw that, there was actually flooding on Thika Road.
on the Githurai, yes. Just after Githurai.
The rest of the way is green all the way, even at the Pangani interchange. It's good so far. Kiambu Road, nothing to report about this morning. Let's finally take a look at Jogoo Road. And this is where the trouble is. As always, coming from Donholm, sections of the road where it's a total standstill. Somewhere next to Buruburu, and then at Makadara, red, meaning vehicles are at a standstill. Then enough sections of that road have slow traffic. You can see bits and pieces of yellow, meaning at least on Jogoo Road, it's a bit slow this morning. That's the traffic situation.
13 minutes past the top of the hour. Let's take a look at how the weekly forecast is going to be looking like. So this stretches since Sunday all the way to next week on Sunday, how the rains will be pounding.
And you were saying that probably Uganda, they're not having floods, but they have enough rain.
Oh, yes.
This is Uganda, even Ethiopia. So there's a lot of rain. I don't know why they're just not reporting floods on their pages.
But then we take a look at how things are going to be. According to Kenya Red Cross, about 14 counties not really affected by the floods, but this is how the 2/3 of the country on the eastern part, but then now a huge focus on the central, the Rift Valley, as well as most of the Nyanza and the western regions. Let me just zoom in for you so that you can have a look at that. The counties that, so this, according to Met Department, saying is going to, these regions receiving this red as well as the orange bits. So this is how 70 all the way to 100 millimeters. So when you see the yellow is about 70, but then the place to really focus on is between 80 to 100 millimeters. This is quite a lot of rain, and it really focuses on. So Nairobi has actually been covered the whole of completely. Parts of Kiambu as well, Kirinyaga, Embu, and you took a look at Tharaka Nithi as well, and Narok. So
as well.
Yes, a lot of bits really covered on the same. That is what you should be expecting when it comes to rainfall for this week.
Wow.
Oh yes. But then just a reminder again, the Met Department will be giving you a whole focus of how things are going to be looking like, and also a focus of how the March, April and May, the whole focus for this long seasonal rainfall focused. But then now specifically for this coming month, that is May, what to expect. So stick around. At around 3 p.m, we'll be giving you updates on the same. Oh yes.
All right, do you have the day's diary?
I do definitely have the day's diary. Let me just have it for you as we get into. So the day's diary, first off, today is going to be a busy day. We'll be giving you all those details on the first page. The Kenya Medical Practitioners, Pharmacists and Dentists Union will today be holding peaceful demonstrations. They're basically continuing with their weekly demos to demand the government to heed their demands. This even as the doctors' strike enters day 48 today. So before we cross over to the next page, Fred, it's keen to note that as the doctors will continue the strike, public sector workers are also set to join the striking doctors in what they call emasculation of trade unions by the government. So even as we're going to be seeing the striking doctors, also expect to have public sector workers on the road as well on that. So we'll be giving you the more details on that. Let's continue our diary onto the second page. And Digital Economy Cabinet Secretary Editorial will today grace the release of the 2023 National Study Report on digital work landscape in Kenya and the private sector outsourcing practices. Stick around to know what the Cabinet Secretary will be saying on the same on matters digital work landscape. Still on matters Cabinet Secretaries, on the next, the Departmental Committee on Transport and Infrastructure will today be meeting with Cabinet Secretary for Roads and Transport, Kipchumba Murkomen, to basically address the increase in the road accidents across the country. However, we do also expect to have the Departmental Committee members of Parliament there asking and grilling the Cabinet Secretary on how the situation in JKIA really looks like. Because, I mean, this is just basically, Murkomen is scheduled to give the committee an update on how the road accidents have been when we started the country. But then we do expect the committee to also ask and grill Murkomen on how, I mean, during the weekend we saw GKIA really flooded, even into the cold rooms. We do expect the Cabinet Secretary to be telling us more on that. And speaking about GKIA and KQ now, Kenya Airways has suspended the flights to Kinshasa effective today, citing the continued detention of KQ employees by the Military Intelligence Unit. Keen to note on that as well. Other highlights that are just to add on to our news diary for today. Today we do expect President William Ruto to be holding a cabinet meeting this morning to discuss on additional measures to take to ensure that citizens are looked after following the flood situation in the country. Again, just to remind you, the Director of Kenya Meteorological Services, Dr. David Gitungu, will today be updating the country with the March, April, May long rain seasonal forecast, and also announcing the weather forecast for this month. That will be happening at 3 p.m. So stick around. In our subsequent bulletins, we'll be giving you all that lowdown for you. And finally, let's take a look at Today in History. So today in history, today back in on a day like today, on the year 2014, former President Uhuru Kenyatta signed into law a controversial bill that legalizes polygamy for men. It was a whole conversation back then in 2014 when I don't know where I was at that time. wearing school uniform.
You're 17 right now. You must have been 7 by then. Yeah.
You know, wearing school uniform and carrying a bag at that time. That is in 2014 when Fred was out here chasing the bag. Let's get into the newspaper.
Colonialists. Okay, let's get into the newspapers now. All right, and we start off with the Standard, which has a very interesting photo on the front page, and it's an aerial view of the extent of the damage in Mai Mahiu yesterday after the flash floods that were caused by water that had been collected in a railway tunnel. And they call it deluge of death. Residents near Kijabe Dam were warned about rapidly rising waters, but no action was taken, and thereafter an entire village was caught unawares at night as floods of waters swept everything on its way. And I think they're giving prominence to the fact that warnings had been issued, and we continue to urge Kenyans to take any such warnings seriously to avoid further loss of life. The story is extensively covered in pages 2, 3, and 4. As we continue getting more and more stories about the flooding situation, including on the return to school. But the front page of the Standard is basically about what happened in Mai Mahiu yesterday. I cross over to the back page. Madrid wary of Bayern in European Clasico. Bayern versus Real Madrid. And this is a UEFA Champions League.
Oh, that's going to be an interesting
Bayern versus Real Madrid tonight at 10 p.m. and tomorrow Dortmund versus PSG. And that's interesting for lovers of football. That's the Standard today. Not much on the front pages, but yes, extensive coverage of the flooding situation across the country on the inside pages. Very few mentions of any other thing apart from probably workers' rights and issues around workers' unions ahead of Labor Day.
All right, let's give you Daily Nation, more analysis on this particular paper. 4 stories covered. The biggest one, they say Black Monday and Death at Dawn, when the residents of Jerusalem and Kamuchiri villages in Mai Mahiu returned to bed on Sunday night after a day spent attending church service with loved ones, visiting with family and friends, or preparing children for school. They looked forward to a new busy week, but unbeknownst to them, tragedy lay in wait uphill in a gully that had collected massive flood waters. And then early yesterday, a slurry of mud, rocks and trees came down, sweeping away everything in its path, leaving 46 people and counting dead. More is on page 23. They've also highlighted quite the numbers there. 46, the bodies that have been recovered so far, and 102 people who have been rescued and who are recuperating at the Mai Mahiu and Naivasha sub-county hospitals. I was talking to Willie Dennis Njiru yesterday, just saying how the doctors just decided to actually, despite the whole ongoing strike by the doctors, they actually decided to come and take care of this patients. But then still on the same matters, floods as well, and confusion over school reopening as Machugu defends the move, and thousands of primary school and secondary school students had trooped to their respective schools early yesterday, and whether the government had pushed forward the opening dates for the second term by a week. Pages 4 and 5. We'll be getting to know from your panelists this morning what this really means, kind of directives on the same. The highlights are on the top strip. For cheap loans, Kenya yields to tough World Bank conditions. What President William Ruto was saying yesterday. And on the back page, you can flip to the back page now, talking about matters, the reprieve for residents of border counties as state scraps ID vetting committees. Basically saying the immigration PS says a role of verifying eligibility will solely lie with the chiefs and security agencies. And this particular, so the new rules, which kick in tomorrow, that is on Wednesday, apply to Kenyans in border counties. So if you're listening to this, this is some good news. You can have and take a look at that on the back page. But then that whole bit, Kenya KQ suspends flights to Kinshasa in protest of a detention of crew. And this is just really going to go all the way to even affect the economy between the two countries. Imagine you really had to fly all the way to Kinshasa and much as business, it is going to be affecting that as well. That is a Daily Nation.
Yeah, and the same KQ story is on the front page of the Business Daily. KQ suspends DRC flights in protest over detained crew. It is one of the big stories on the front page of the Business Daily. The other main headline, Kenya cancels France-backed Mau Summit toll highway contract. Now that we're discussing roads, this is the main Nakuru-Nairobi highway, and which forms, yes, the Nairobi-Nakuru Mau Summit road. Kenya has cancelled the contract for the construction, citing, among other things, high toll fees proposed by the French contractors. An image there of a road that has been destroyed because of floods, and that is in Kitale, Kapenguria, Lodwar, the same road that heads to Juba. Now, a section of it has been completely destroyed. That road has been cut off by floods. It's on the front page of the Business Daily. Those are the main stories on the Business Daily. Let's move on to other dailies this morning.
On to People Daily, there's a very gory photo there of the bus of Easy Coach that was swept away by flash floods as a People Daily, and at Mahimahu, Nakuru County. And you can just imagine, it not only affected the villages around there. If you know, someone in this bus could have been from Mahimahu, from Nairobi, and just was caught up by all this. And they're talking about road cuts, vehicles swept while seasonal dam bursts it banks, causing gushing overflows that claim lives and decimate hundreds of homes in Don Hora. Pages 2, 3, 4, and 5 on that. The last story reflected on this paper, thousands stranded as schools reopening postponed. Picture there, students of Ganjoni Junior Secondary returning home yesterday. That is a People Daily for you. We'll be getting back to this paper on page 10.
Kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo, mafuriko ya mauti, habari kuu pale, zaidi ya watu 46 waangamizwa na mafuriko Mai Mahiu, maafa yakiongezeka kwingineko nchini, na nakadiria kuwa watu zaidi ya 120 wameaga dunia kwa sababu ya mafuriko. Mafuriko kule Mai Mahiu, unazungumzia dimbwi la maji. Mafuriko yaliangamiza watu eneo la Mai Mahiu, yadaiwa kutokana na dimbwi lililofurika baada ya mvua kubwa kunyesha. Na kuna picha pale, picha nyingi tu zinazoonyesha athari za mafuriko kule Mai Mahiu na kwingineko. Habari zaidi kwenye ukurasa wa mbele. Oparanya ataka ma-DVD na Weta wavunje vyama, asema ni hatua hiyo pekee itadhihirisha nia yao ya kuunganisha jamii ya magharibi. Kwingineko, unajisi watupa mwalimu wa madrasa jela kwa miaka 20. Tukisalia kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo pale juu, wanafunzi na wazazi wa mlia wa Waziri Machogu. Yes, issues to do with government communication, and we'll be discussing that with my panelists in a short while. Habari zaidi sasa, hii EPL ni farasi wawili pekee, wengine ni punda tu. Habari kamili. Habari kamili kwenye ukurasa wa 20
wa gazeti hili.
Gazeti hili la Taifa Leo. Sasa tuangazie gazeti lingine. Umeona gazeti zote hapa zinazungumzia mambo ya mafuriko, floods and the death toll. Then you come to this paper. It is also in Kenya. You might think it's actually somewhere, I don't know where, in Egypt or something. The Star.
The Star.
Doomed chopper propeller linked to Ogola's death. Has the probe even ended? When did it end? Why do we have this headline? But then again, this is the Star, and today's Tuesday.
And today's Tuesday.
And you know what happens on Tuesday.
Oh, yes.
They carry the My Government copy inside. So no mention at all of any flood situation, not even in the smaller highlights.
Oh, yes.
On the front page.
Should have been even on the right scroll.
Give it a small mention somewhere.
Yes, and just give an update on the same.
You know, they say media is a mirror of society. What society does the Star mirror this morning? And
particularly the fact that it is inside my government is inside, so that means it is free actually today. So more reason to actually have.
That says a lot. That says a lot with the kind of sponsorship that was denied to other media houses and given to this paper. And then again, Is that indicative of why they have the kind of news they have on the front page? If you came across this paper today in Nairobi, you'd be forgiven to think you're in the Maldives or anywhere else. They talk about ODM bigwigs seeking to influence grassroots polls on the front page. Lack of political goodwill, delaying police reforms.
Even elephants.
To be honest, it's
even
totally
elephants have made on the front page of this paper.
But not the floods.
But the floods.
Totally disconnected daily today.
Oh, yes.
As a journalist, I must say this is quite unfortunate.
And just to show you how big of a deal this particular story on the floods is, on page 21, today Daily Nation hasn't given a cartoon. It is, actually, it is a cartoon, but then it's not one of those shouting. I think actually on my first glimpse of it, it actually looked like a photo. But then when you take a look at it, it is actually a cartoon, but then a candle lit, and there's a black canvas and just a black background on that.
It mirrors the same headline they have on
yes.
the front page, Black Monday.
Yes.
The black background and exactly what's happening. They've lit a candle for those who've died in the flood situation. It is actually sad. Back to the Star, I'm wondering, they couldn't even find space for a photo, just a photo, not even an explanation, just a photo of the flood situation.
Same. Because actually, they always do that. A photo of, they always have a collage of photos on, just, two different kind of photos on the front page. So
today, I'm sorry, I am a journalist, but I'll say they missed the bus completely.
Oh, yes.
On page 18 of the Standard, the cartoon talks about issues fertilizer, and we have the CS for Agriculture working on the blade of a pair of scissors, which is the National Assembly, which has already, some members of the National Assembly have already started a motion towards his impeachment.
Yes.
And the CS is saying, resign? Who? How? Why? And it reminds me of another CS back in the day who said, I'd rather die than resign. I don't think we've ever seen any member of cabinet actually resign.
Resigning.
I think the one who resigned last probably, or the one that's most memorable, was Mwai Kibaki, who resigned as a Minister for Health. But that was decades before Nyaringita was a thought. Anyway.
Which again,
those are the dailies today.
Which again reminds me, Health Cabinet Secretary Susan Komecha was also on the same blade. I don't know how her fate has gone on. But then finally, let's take a look at the cartoon on People Daily, and it goes with the whole bit of the KQ on the same. There it is on the screen. This, the commentator there says, sitting on the tail of the Kenya Airways, saying, from power blackouts to floods, is this our national shame or fame? And there's also a shark there. My first glimpse on that commentator, he probably might resemble Larry Madowo.
Oh, so. If it's him, then he's made it. I told you, once you get to be featured in any cartoon,
you've made it.
All right, we'll be looking at some of these headlines and discussions with my panelists this morning. Do stand by for that. Titus Lote will be in studio. Is MP Kachiliba, alongside Arnold Maliba, Strategic Communications Advisor, UDA. So do stand by for that conversation, of which you can be part of through social media on X at TV47 News and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya.
Oh, yes.
Katika kipindi cha Mfahamu Kiongozi, tunachimba zaidi kufahamu majukumu ya viongozi wetu. Hapa hatuchunguzi tu mafanikio yao, bali tunaangazia safari yao, maisha yao kibinafsi na vitu wanavyovutiwa navyo.
Ugali and mboga, not nyama, and the greens.
My favorite ride, ndege.
Jitayarishe kufurahishwa, kupata mwanga na kumfahamu kiongozi wako.
Lions sing tonight.
Kila Alhamisi saa 1:30 jioni.
Explore Africa's inspiring legends. Stories
stories of courage, resilience, and the indomitable African spirit.
I think as far as Africa is concerned, music cannot be for enjoyment. Music has to be for revolution.
What was really important was payback time to nature.
The environment is everyday issue. It's the air we breathe. It's the water we drink. It's the food we eat. And we can't live without these things.
Faces of Africa on TV 47. One of the most heinous crimes ever committed in Kenya that sent the country into shock.
In my forensic life, I've never come across such incidents around.
She told me that there was a friend who was leaving the country. They are going to have an early dinner.
I found texts indicating that time was running out. The intention was to ensure that there was no trace of this girl.
Watch how it all unfolds on Crimes Untold. Coming soon. On the next episode of The Realtor.
Setting up an office is one thing that comes in one's mind anytime you think of business and an area of your personalized operations. But you know, it is not just about space that you need for you to set up this office.
So you consider the parking space, you consider the other different amenities around that place, like let's say the boardroom, the water supply, the electricity supply. Do we have a backup generator? Do they have like break rooms where people can take a break, go rest, you know?
What you need to do is to keep tuned on this Tuesday, because we shall be discussing things that you need to put to consideration when it comes to a modernized working space or office setup here on The Realtor.
To your #1 weekend entertainment show. This is, of course, Beat Plug Extra.
Na safari hii katika Mfahamu Kiongozi tutakuletea viongozi aina mbalimbali.
Nikuwe na Nisani kama 10 na pia nikuwe menua minibus. Minibus ni
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Cafe, and in studio with Arnold Maliba, Strategic Communications Advisor, UDA, and Titus Lote and Pika Chiliba. Good morning, gentlemen. Karibu sana. The headlines this morning, of course, granted, given what happened yesterday in Mai Mahiu, actually all the dailies have focused on that, with photos of what happened in Mai Mahiu. The Daily Nation calls it Black Monday, and even the cartoon on the Daily Nation is dedicated to the same, what's going on across the country. On the Standard, deluge of death, with an aerial image of the devastation caused by the flash floods in Mai Mahiu yesterday. If you look at other dailies, the People Daily, floods kill 91, and that's the only story covered on the front page. Away from that, it's only the issue about the schools reopening. And yes, on the front page of Taifa Leo, mafuriko ya mauti. Na picha pale kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa gazeti hili kionyesha janga hili na picha zaidi za kwingineko kwenye nchi. Mambo ya mafuriko kila mahali. Lakini The Star Leo kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wanazungumzia masuala ya ODM na grassroots elections at ODM, and apparently they have a splash on the doomed chopper propeller linked to Ogola's death, and I'm shocked that no one else had it, and I guess the Star is very way ahead of everyone else. On the front page of the Star, there are the highlights: 27-year-old woman fights a common eye condition. That made it to the front page of the Star. Lack of political goodwill delays police reforms, also on the front page of the Star. And in matters conservation, Jumbo advocate out on a mission, also making it to the front page of the Star, but not a single mention of the flood situation in the country. And as I said before, if you came across this paper somewhere, you would be forgiven to think that you're somewhere in Italy or elsewhere. As a strategic communications advisor, what is your take of this tangent that the Star has taken away from what everyone else appears to be talking about?
The Star has the flooding story inside. And the process of coming up with headlines and how you design the splash, you guys call it the splash or the front page, is as political as any other decision. So normally they sit down, look at the priority. Remember that people are not buying just a common story because it's in tangent. There are people who actually want to look at different headlines. So headlines are how we actually, that's the exhibition. That's the open window through which people are looking at a newspaper. So if the Star actually has got an exclusive on the Ogola story, which is actually a very big story, it's an issue that hasn't gone away, it's big, then they run with it. It's about exclusivity. I do not see that there's any problem with how the Star has actually chosen to go, especially since they are covering it. I know that there are days in the past when newspapers will actually, the editors have a conversation and have one headline. That did not happen yesterday. In the past, we've had one headline, especially during elections and when we have got major emergencies or situations. As of yesterday, that did not. For example, yesterday there was a terror attack in Elwak, a return after a very long time. You don't see that here. Yet it's actually a very important story to actually follow through. So the front page, the splash can always not contain all the stories. So as heavy as the deluge in Kijabe is, the human cost so high, we actually cannot politicize how the editorial board at the Star then chooses to actually carry the stories.
Okay.
Yeah. And also, when you go on a stand to buy a paper, you are trying to look at variety. Not everybody can actually buy all the papers. We've got about 5 papers today out there in circulation, away from the smaller ones. But not everybody buys that. You buy a paper according to the headline. That still remains the tradition and the preference.
Bonalote, yet the Star found space on the front page to use a file photo of ODM, a file photo, nothing recent, from I think 2 years ago during the campaigns, a photo of the party leader, his 2 deputies, and one would imagine that space could have carried a different story, probably linked to what many people are talking about, and probably providing more details. It is because they say media mirrors the society and what people are talking about. And I don't know, but do you agree with Bwana Maliba?
First of all, good morning.
Good morning.
My condolences to the families of the Kenyans that have lost their loved ones because of the floods. But yesterday, when I listened to the government spokespersons, he says that we have lost 166 people and too many other losses in terms of property and in terms of opportunities. So it is important that we condole with the families, because there are those people who are not even watching us today because they are mourning the loved ones. And so if they get a chance, we can say, Paul, eh? 2, I listened to Maliba, my friend, my very good friend. He's a strategic communicator. You and the media. I am not in the media. But one thing I know is that the media will always want to resonate with the situations at hand. And the situation at hand now is actually about the floods. And it's an emergency that has even caught attention, not of the Kenyans alone, but globally. I was listening to the CNN yesterday, and they talked about the floods in Kenya. So basically, I can say not coming from the media background, I cannot be able to say why. But I think, just like you said, people are looking for variety. It's a world made of variety. There are a lot of people looking for things that are not the same. So if all the headlines are talking about the floods, that probably, as a headline, as the splash, every newspaper talks about the flood, then you might not be able to get exactly to buy that newspaper, because you say you buy one, I can be able to get all the stories. So probably strategically, in terms of marketing, they're trying to put up a different face, the splash for that newspaper. But inside, you can be able to also read about the floods. So that's probably my thinking.
The reason why we pay close attention to this paper is because it is one daily that is chosen by the government for advertising. Especially on today's copy of the Star, is where they have MyGov, which is a pull-out by government on advertising for tenders, job opportunities, and so many other things. And probably we cannot ignore this daily, especially on a Tuesday, because it is used to deliver a lot of government messaging. And one may wonder what kind of message the government should be linked with.
Probably the question I will ask, first of all, coming to the question you asked initially, you said they have put a very old photograph of the ODM bigwigs, and you can actually see the subtitle is they are planning to, what was that? They're planning to influence the grassroots elections. You know, grassroots elections is where you get the delegates who then vote for the party, all the way the party structure. So probably the government is trying to look at the politics of 2027. I cannot say that is it, but probably I'm actually using a probability. My other question that I wanted to ask you is the Star a government newspaper?
I've just explained the relationship between the Star and the government. It is a one, and no other daily carries that pull out. It's only the Star, and especially on Tuesday. The reason I'm saying this is that in all the highlights on the front page, and there's space dedicated to other smaller stories, like a 27-year-old woman fighting a common eye condition on the front page, lack of political goodwill delays police reforms on the front page, and a jumbo advocate out on a mission, which sounds more like a feature on the front page. And no mention of floods completely. And is it intentional to try and hide this piece of news, probably from the front page of the Star?
I think that that line of questioning, for me, is a little bit off the rails, because as a legacy media, the newspaper is not the virgin breaker of news now. The new media has actually run away with all manner of, by the time we get here, the newspaper must actually be different. So if you run traditionally with the way newspapers would be, that exclusively we are going to get details from the newspaper, you might actually miss the strategy that the Star might be employing. Because deep down, you find the flood story in the paper. But are they supposed to run with the situation as well? Fair enough. It has to be situation relevant. A newspaper has to be situation relevant. Information has to be timely for it to make sense, yes. And none of the story on the front actually is irrelevant. All of those stories are relevant. There's very little that people online have not read or understood with what we have already. So do we do headlines in solidarity with the situation?
Are you saying there's no value
do we have
on the front page
again,
of the Daily Nation or on the Star?
Again, Frida, I'll ask, is the media supposed to be a choir? Are we supposed to sing one song? If we do that, then what makes them stand out for them to actually get?
There are days when the media has different headlines and they do value.
And,
but when there's a big tragedy that has happened in the country, are we saying there's no value in?
There are days where editorial boards across newspapers will agree and have a single headline. We've had that sometimes once after 5 years or so. In this particular instance, all of us know that that didn't happen. So, whereas I do not work for the Star and I do not want also to speak for them, I do not think that it's fair for us to...
You've done a good job so far speaking for the Star.
No, I'm just trying to actually I'm a former sub-editor, so I know, actually, and I'm talking about newspaper sub-editor.
Exactly why I posed that question to you.
So I look at the choices that we will make at the editorial board to just come up with a headline. What will make us stand out? So most of the stories about the flood actually are on social media. People watched it on TV. TV's carried big features. And as a nation, we were glued there. The new media has a way of running away with these stories. So what then the newspaper the following day is supposed to do is to bring in a different aspect of that. Now, if you are at the Star, for example, and you have got an exclusive story, you have got the initial report from the Ogolla story, wouldn't you run with it? Everybody else, every journalist wants to break a story. And that is why you run with the exclusive banner, exclusive, breaking news. So for whatever reason there is, I do not think that the Star won't get biased today. It will actually get biased because
it's free today. So
I'm actually saying it will get readership because, first of all, and by the way, they've actually done, journalistically, they've done very good work. Because the fear of any journalist is actually to do a story and you don't get any feedback. If you don't get any feedback, it means no one is reading you. No one is actually out there focusing on you. That we've actually taken about 5 minutes to actually talk about the Star. It means that they succeeded this particular time from a professional perspective.
Okay. That's from the strategic communications advisor for UDA.
Yeah. But that then does not mean that we are damping down on what happened yesterday. Yesterday was a Black Monday. Okay. We still do not know the gravity of the human cost that is actually involved. So
it is a developing story.
It's still a running story.
Yet to get to the end.
Yes.
So we do expect that the media will keep us abreast.
And it's actually evolved. It's actually evolved from initially an old dam, which some of us didn't know existed, to a story about a dam that does not exist. And of course, then defining what a dam is, a tunnel that had actually clogged up. And then, of course, there was pressure. But what we know is that this deluge was actually so heavy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's been, still on the same line, issues of communication, there's been a lot of questions about government's communications, general communication about this flooding situation. One of the biggest communication that came this week was a postponement of the reopening dates of our schools. That communication was sent out very late into the night on Sunday night, I think at around midnight, by the CS for Education, Machogu. Now, the result was that many students who had actually planned to travel to school still left their homes and proceeded to go to school. Some boarded trains and buses and because they had not seen that communication. That in itself has raised a lot of questions because the government had enough time to say whether or not the schools would proceed to reopen. But when such a communication comes at midnight from government, directing something different, questions will be asked. Many parents, and I've seen headlines inside pages, outrage as Machogu postpones schools opening on reporting day. These are the questions people are asking. Why didn't you tell us earlier? Questions must be asked about this kind of communication, Bonalote.
Well, good. We need to give credit where it's due. On Sunday night, the minister gave communications that schools are not going to be open on Monday, but instead being given another 1 week. On Monday, the same Sunday night is what happened to Maimayu and many other places where we actually lost lives. First of all, I will need to give credit to the ministry because we are dealing with a situation of an emergency. You do not plan in an emergency. You cannot say that you need to give communications much earlier, yet an emergency is just happened. So you act as per the emergency. So I think one, the minister was working. By the time that they're giving communications at night, basically tells you that at night, at midnight, the minister was still working and working for this country. And I listened to what the minister said. Machogu said he's given a reason why he had to postpone the opening of the schools. And he said, if we had allowed the schools to open, then we are going to count more losses. And everybody was going to point an hand to the government and say, listen, you did not give us directives. So it's better to give directives late and not to give directive at all so that you avoid the blames of giving directive late. So I think for me, I will say that the minister acted well because it's an emergency. What is happening in this country, the flooding situation, has caught everybody unawares, including the government. And so if the government is able to, at that point, at that midnight of Sunday, realize that is an enormous situation that is going to cause more deaths, should we allow the schools to continue, then the government is very justified to actually give the directives. Well, the government has gone ahead and said, for those that travel to school, for those children that travel to school because they were not able to get these directives earlier, those children are supposed to be safe in school, and the schools are supposed to receive them and allow them to continue from school. So what the government has done is the right thing to ensure that the learners are safe at home for those that had no travel, and they are safe at school for those that are travel. Okay. It will be very wrong for government not to give the directives, and then children are caught up with this flooding situation in transit. Okay. So for me, I actually say the government acted right. And
we are not questioning the postponement. Actually, it was the right decision. It was the right move by the ministry to do it. It's just the timing of the communication. Because that's the issue we're talking about, is communication.
It's true. It's an emergency situation. You know, you do not know when an emergency happens.
Because Banalote probably tried to link the communication and what happened in Maimahiu. What happened in Maimahiu happened at around 2 a.m. after this communication had already been sent. There was no connection.
That was barely 40 minutes.
There was no. We cannot say the education ministry knew beforehand there would be something in Maimahiu. And then issued the communication. It is a timing. Nothing major happened during the daytime on Sunday that changed the government's intention. Yet this was issued late into the night, meaning that even some of the children who would have been subjected to any kind of risk were actually subjected to that risk.
I think, first of all, the inconvenience, of course, is regretted, but then safety trumps any inconvenience. So that then we do not get here, or rather we get into paralysis by analysis. We are going around this issue about the time when this was actually communicated. But let's also be fair. First of all, the same ministry had earlier on communicated that schools should not open. Remember, that is a second communication. I don't know why we are not picking that out, flagging
the initial communication was that
the initial communication, schools that are affected should not open. So already there was a communication to that end. The general closure is that at that particular point, the CES then had sufficient data to think that then we might not need to go all the way. And by the way, we recall planes that are actually midway. A flight that is midway and is recalled. So the government can actually call back, say we go back home, even when the children are already in the buses. If there is sufficient data to justify why that decision will be done, then I do not think that the inconvenience suffered trumps the safety of our children out there. Because remember, on Sunday, you just said that there was no major incident on Sunday. On Sunday, there was a school, I think in Samburu, that had 52 people on board. Thankfully, they were not students. It was carried away, and again, thankfully, there were no casualties. That already started informing the thinking about how bad this can actually play out. There was so much data that was actually coming in. So, whereas that story has not been reported
last week, so the ministry was already aware that the situation was already dire.
Fair enough, but then that is why they actually had gone
earlier.
They had already. That's why 24 hours earlier they had actually spoken that in areas that are affected, this should be done. But Fred,
my concern is that it would appear that cabinet secretaries or very senior government officials are not able to conclusively decide on something and go ahead and execute a certain decision.
You are buying into
to be waiting for some go-ahead from higher authorities, probably from State House, from the office of the president. And that, in situations like the one we are facing, could leave the country vulnerable.
Fred, no one can manage Kenya from their own phone. No one, no single individual can run Kenya the way you actually are thinking. And we should not run into peddling corridor rumors and stories, even stories ajaba, that somebody was waiting for. It's the minister who actually had. Remember that a minister...
we should blame the minister for the delay.
But first of all, we shouldn't even blame him. We should actually thank him for actually having been strategic. It doesn't matter whatever the time. And like I said, the inconvenience is regretted. That still doesn't trump.
You are a communications expert.
That still doesn't trump.
And the time is also a factor in communication. If communication is delayed even by a second, it could mean something.
This is an emergency situation. And in an emergency situation, I've just told you that once a plane lifts off, you know how difficult that process is. Wherever you are going, even if you are going in a conference, whatever you're going to do, if there is reason to believe that that plane should actually come back, it's actually recalled.
If you had reason to believe that the plane was at risk and you allow the same plane to take off, then call it back, and then something happens before it lands back safely, wouldn't that communication be...
What has happened before the students go home safely? This you are comparing. No, nothing lucky. You are comparing. And by the way, by the time the students were actually out in the streets, the small number that was out there, if something were to happen, the severity would not be as big as if anything were to happen today.
Okay.
So, whatever way, I am saying the inconvenience is regretted, but the decision was important and it should be lauded for what it is.
Okay.
We would rather be inconvenienced rather than regret.
Okay.
Yeah.
Many Kenyans have questioned the ability of cabinet secretaries to actually do their job, including the president. He questioned some of the competence of his own cabinet members a while back. It is what many Kenyans are thinking. This cabinet secretary had all the information he had. It would appear he was waiting for a go-ahead from elsewhere for him to execute. And that is a concern by Kenyans, that when a cabinet secretary is able to do something to save Kenyans, and yet he is forced to wait for a different authority to give him a go-ahead to execute, that could actually be a problem for the rest of this country.
Well, I think it's important that we still continue giving credits where it's supposed. But that does not mean that we are going to let all cabinet secretaries free from the decisions that they have made. Some cabinet secretaries have actually cast a lot of doubts to Kenyans in terms of their capabilities to perform. And I think Kenyans have got all rights to question and request the president to act on this cabinet. And I think the president by himself actually has come out to even question the capabilities of his own cabinet secretaries. And I think that questioning by the president about the capabilities of the cabinet secretaries then points into a cabinet secretary that might not have been selected very well. But that does not mean that once you question, you can see Penina Malonza, for example, the cabinet secretary, even when she was being vetted, there were a lot of doubts about her capability to manage a docket. But after that, I think she's been able to come into terms with the reality that she's supposed to perform, and nobody has actually been questioning Penina Malonza since when she sat into office. But I think the focus has gone to other cabinet secretaries. There are those that are giving declarations that are not even pro-government. There are those that are giving proclamations that are very inflammatory to the public and to the civil servants of this country. There are those that are actually giving directives after being given orders, but there are those that are working. So I cannot say that in anywhere in the world we can get cabinet secretaries that are performing to the best of their abilities. Nowhere. I don't think there is any cabinet anywhere in the world that everybody is going to say this is a good cabinet that performs 100%. We are all humans. There is none that can be able to perform to 100%. But the majority of our cabinet secretaries are performing in a manner that they're casting a lot of doubts to Kenyans. I've looked at yesterday. Yesterday I was actually sad as a Kenyan. Looking at only point of entry and point of exit, that is the JKIA, raining. It was actually not drizzling. It was not leaking. It was raining inside the airport. You will actually see rain, and you will see staff struggling to contain the water from then spreading on the floor and letting people slide and probably even break their backs. And yet, the same airport sometimes back had given a warning, and the cabinet secretary for transport went in there and even had people sacked. And after people were sacked, he said that he's going to give an order that the whole situation is going to be contained. That was some times ago. Now we see the same thing, and then we ask ourselves, Why was he sacking people initially? Why was he putting a task force in place? Why was money appropriated for that function? And why is the situation becoming even worse? At that level, when you look at the situation and the functioning of the cabinet secretary and his action, you will then start to question that if all cabinet secretaries are going to operate in that manner, then we are only being given a lip service and not functions in this country. And the reason why we are saying not all cabinet secretaries are bad. And for this reason, I will laud Bwana Machogu for having postponed the opening of schools, even if it's at midnight. Because imagine, if he did not postpone the opening of schools, and you see this headline in all the newspapers flashing on Monday, even parents themselves will have asked him to allow them to stay for a period of another 1 week. So he actually even came before the parents. I'm telling you, even if you're a parent, you will not have sent your children to school yesterday having seen this headline. So I think the cabinet secretary at that point acted very well. He actually acted before the parents requested for the postponement. But for some other cabinet secretaries, what happens at JKIA is something that is regrettable. What is happening with the Ministry of Health, the striking doctors that has now gone into the 49 days, and there is no truce in between these people, then there is a reason why Kenyans are supposed to complain, and there is a reason why the president himself is supposed to complain. The president has complained, and I think he's told them, he's given them a warning, so that should he make an action of axing them off the cabinet, nobody will blame the president. Okay. I think for me, the president himself overworks, and the reason why he's able to point out on the cabinet secretaries iniquities.
Okay, and I think you've gotten to the crux of the matter. It would appear that quite a good number of the cabinet secretaries are not able to independently execute their duties. And I think even a senior editor, Macharia Gaitho, has touched on this in his opinion in the Daily Nation today, page 21. And he talks about the president and I cultism, where every cabinet secretary, when they want to make a declaration, and they have to mention the president's name for them to appear credible. And such situation presents some challenges. It would appear that they are very hesitant to be seen to speak by themselves without invoking the name of the president.
Fred, as a journalist, you know that opinion is free, including Macharia Gaitho's, but facts are sacred. The source of where you are getting this is social media banter and gossip columns and stuff like that. A lot of times, the origins. What would be your source?
The fact that social media gives
your source. That's what I'm saying. But you weight it. I was talking about the information that comes, especially in an emergency and such. I would, for me, for example, be concerned about what happened in Elwak, because that in and of itself could be a signal of a new thing that is actually beginning, or was it an opportunistic attack that actually realized that the country is gripped with something else, and therefore a cell somewhere quickly mobilized and went out to do whatever they did. But be that as it is, let's not really put the nation in paralysis with a lot of analysis here, including the opinion that CSS cannot do it, talking about the president and I. So whom should they be talking about? Should they be talking about the opposition and themselves? A lot of these CSS, you actually see them making statements in their names. You are looking at the legal documents and instruments they are putting out there. So this simple decision that came late at a point where Machogu felt that he had sufficient data to make a decision, and he made the call. Once he made that particular call, for me, it doesn't matter at what point it was done, because it was about life. So long as it's about life, and especially for a vulnerable group of society, I really wouldn't get into, look at Machogu's age. He's a professional, he's a politician who's been there. To really think that Machogu cannot on his own sit down and realize that as much as I had made this particular decision to close a few schools, but generally we are not in control of the weather. Generally we are not in control of how this thing is actually playing out. So he calls back. For me, that's enough. And I will say this repeatedly. The little inconvenience is regretted, but that cannot trump the safety concerns that are actually being put in place. Talking about, there's this obsession about regime bashing. Everybody else, People think that journalism is regime bashing. People think that being an active citizen is you bash a regime.
Asking questions about the actions.
They are even politicians.
Especially when it comes to
politicians.
Human lives.
They are even politicians.
We shouldn't ask questions. That is regime bashing.
I'm talking about there are even politicians who think that oversight is regime bashing. So even when they make a decision that is critical, and by the way, running a government is quite
You did not answer
difficult.
the question.
I'm getting to it.
Questions on the administration's actions when it
actually
comes to
asking.
safety.
This is not a question that is being asked.
Is it regime bashing?
This is not a question that is being asked. This is a spin. This is a spin. The question was on the timing. None other than the CS himself responded to it. But we are going around spinning this. It's no longer a question. It is a spin. We are now bringing in. We are now even bringing in an opinion. We are now bringing in opinions.
This is something totally
gossip. I'm talking about, totally but you used it to buttress your point and your question.
And I will continue with this discussion.
You know what I'm saying? But you brought that. You cited that in a way to buttress the conversation you had.
The fact of the matter is that the response by the cabinet secretary is only to validate his postponement of the reopening. The delay in issuing the communication has yet to be explained till now.
And I have actually explained to you. You probably just didn't listen. I said this. That as a CS or as a decision maker, wherever you are, once you are in receipt of sufficient data to make a decision, at whatever hour you make that call, especially if it's a critical issue, if it's an emergency, you make that call. And the CS has done that.
Let's leave that there because questions will continue being asked about this.
Importantly.
And we shall not stop asking those questions.
Questions should
Whether
be asked.
It will come out as we are bashing the regime.
No, but I'm saying
but we'll have to.
Questions should be asked, but spins will be countered as spins.
Okay. Let's move on and discuss other issues. And let's now talk about something that's closer to you as members of the UDA party, the elections that are going on. A lot has happened and with the UDA grassroots elections. Part of it is what happened in Nairobi. And we've seen what has happened with Governor Sakaja, the governor of Nairobi. He had indicated that he was keen on seeking the chairmanship of UDA branch Nairobi. That in itself caused a rift, a bit of a disagreement between him and the deputy president, who's keen on someone else, which is very correct and very right in political circles. But the deputy president made a very curious remark over the weekend on Sunday, talking about Nairobi and saying that as a stakeholder, him and the president will now take charge of seeing that Nairobi works directly and will be more concerned about what is happening in Nairobi. That many people have interpreted to mean that the deputy president is not comfortable with the way Governor Sakaja is running this city. He could be correct in his own assessment, but it speaks of political machinations in the running of Nairobi. There are concerns that that kind of statement alone would mean that we go back to national government intervention in the running of Nairobi. Bwana Lote, do you think it is the right thing to do right now for the city of Nairobi, given the challenges that are there?
Well, if you listen to the proponents of centralizing, of putting Nairobi in the central government, during the BAMBA talk, that debate was there. It's not a debate that just came recently, because even when we were doing the constitution in 2010, it was very clear. There were a lot of people who suggested that Nairobi is very important to be considered as a county by itself, to operate like a county. And there are those who felt that Nairobi can operate as a county. I think with back and forth, it was agreed that Nairobi can run as a county. But I think if you look at the administration of Uhuru and now the administration of Ruto, after the first term of Nairobi, when Sonko came in the second term, Uhuru felt it was not tenable for Nairobi to operate as a county. And I think we all know the debacles until Sonko was hosted. And then there came an army general who then managed Nairobi through what we call the NMS, the Nairobi Metropolitan Services. I think the same thinking, if you listen to the President Ruto, before even the Deputy President spoke about Nairobi, he said Nairobi is too important to be left to be managed as a county, because the debacles within counties, we all know how counties are managed by the MCAs, putting a chain around the neck of the governor and then taking the governor around. We've known this. And you can hear there are people who lauded the management of Nairobi through the enemies. Of course, they were the negative side of it. But there are those who felt that at least when enemies took over, we could see Nairobi turning face. The same thinking was a thinking that the president talked about, and now the deputy president has come up. For me, I will forgive myself to think that the deputy president, because of the issues he has with the Sakaja, is when he came in. But if you listen to the nobility of what the president himself said, is that Nairobi is too important to be left to be managed by a governor, just like the other counties. Because one, this is the seat of government. This is actually the capital city of this country. It is actually the business center.
It has nothing to do with UDA politics.
That's why I'm saying I forgive myself to talk about this other point. I think the deputy president, and if you can see the president and I cultism, which is said by Mashari Gajido, the deputy president, I and the president. So whether he's talking about himself and the president thinking big beyond the party issues, personally, the timing was probably the wrong thing. The timing probably was the wrong thing, because that is the point where UD was doing its grassroots elections. But I think the nobility of the idea is Nairobi City is too important. I will also take it like that. You will need to take it like that.
Do you feel it's time where we'll probably go the same way, or probably something similar like the NMS route?
Well, that is what I will think, because Nairobi is too important to be left to be managed by a governor. Nairobi is actually supposed to be managed by the central government. The reason why I'm saying this is, look at the doctors' strike. Immediately, doctors were devolved. That is when we started to see health sector getting a beating and challenges and issues coming through. If, for example, today the teaching fraternity, the TSC, is again devolved, you will actually now starting seeing issues of teachers having a beating, because counties are still too small to be able to manage issues that are big. And the reason why, if you go to the counties, you find those that are devolved, that is the ECDs. The ECDs have got problems, but you can still find that the primary, secondary teachers are still getting some bit of a latitude, because it's managed from the central government. So I will say Nairobi being important. Nairobi is very important for it to be allowed to be managed by a governor. It should be managed by the central government. And so I will forgive me if I will say the timing was the only wrong thing.
It's an issue of timing again.
There is timing, yeah.
Many would think, Bwana Maliba, it's the UDA election issues getting into the politics of running of Nairobi. That is what is coming out.
Well, the problems of Nairobi did not begin with the UDA elections. We've only done elections, I think, a week ago. It's not even a week proper. We did the elections over the weekend. So that didn't start today. It would be wrong to synonymize UDA's election and the challenges, the woes that are actually befalling Nairobi. But far from that, let's begin from a point. I hold the opinion that NMS was a blot on devolution, and it should be a sin that we should repent as a nation and never again think of repeating the same. There are ways of actually working out problems around management. In any case, Nairobi already, for those of us born in the city, we know that Nairobi demonstrated that decentralization and a little bit of devolution will really work. Way before, when it was a council, it worked excellently well as a council, far removed from the national government. So Nairobi led the way. And at Bomas, I think, Nairobi's history actually kept on coming up as a decentralized unit that actually worked so well, and part and parcel of its former successes is what informed, strengthened the idea that counties could actually work. What we have here is that when you talk about the change in the management of public affairs in Nairobi, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to shift from devolution. It just means that you can actually run it different, because Nairobi, first of all, is the capital city of the country. At any particular point, Nairobi is not entirely administered by the county alone. We actually need to put that in perspective. It's not.
Away from the NMS, when NMS had come in.
Yes, I'm saying
even institutions run Nairobi away from the county government.
The national government has got a lot of business in the city. That has actually been happening. There is a way they co-share their aspects, because a lot, what are county roads in Nairobi, for example? If you go to counties, you will actually find what are county roads and what then will be quote unquote main roads that the national government can take care of. There are amenities, like for example, Nairobi hosts very many international and supranational, for example. UN Habitat is here. So many other lead agencies are here. And those generally are the business of the national government. Nairobi, again, is the hub for us, is actually the hub for foreign affairs engagement. That, again, is an aspect of the national government. So whatever way you look at it, Nairobi is not an ordinary or normal county. What we are saying is that we cannot, again, say that when we have got challenges in management, we walk back and say that the best way is actually to do away, because the national government has never run Nairobi before. Why are we pretending that the national government...
there's a provision for it to take over the running of Nairobi.
Why haven't they, for example, taken over other counties? What I'm actually saying is that since its finding, the national government has never run Nairobi except under NMS and under Moi.
It is a statement by the deputy president that we're trying to say. He said the president and I will take charge.
I will actually get back to that. But I'm actually telling you, there are on 2 occasions when the national government ran Nairobi's affairs. That is when Nairobi became, or rather, a commission, when Nairobi was put under a commission during Moi's time, and then under NMS. On both occasions, 2 things happened. We got ballooning bills that have not been settled up to now. When it was a commission and NMS, what did they do? There's so much that we can clap for them, but they generated a 20 billion pending bill. You know how much 20 billion will actually do in West Pokot or even Lamu, for example? Those are 5 years probably of what Lamu will get from the national government, 20 billion debt generated out of it. So, but Nairobi has always, for most of the last 60 years, Nairobi has run its affairs independently. So, be that as it may, when the deputy president actually says that we will not allow Nairobi to actually go to the dogs, he knows what he's saying. And he did not say that we will do away with devolution. What we've actually done is that we've run forward, and then since we actually have seen NMS recently, we think that is the direction. The affairs in Nairobi, of course, are of concern. That Nairobi is not being run optimally, that Nairobi is not serving its 4.5 million people, those who sleep in this city, and the 5.5 million people who during the day are part and parcel of what this city is. So there are concerns. Those concerns are legit. But when the deputy president says that he should be interested, he definitely should. He's the principal assistant to the head of state.
He's indicating a possibility of national government intervention.
That's not what he meant. No one has qualified that. And the deputy president...
Invoke the name of the president and say the president and I will take charge.
The president, for example, has gone to the Kamagut goat auction. Has the national government taken over? The president... yes, it is. I'm just saying that the president is actually the head of the state, is the symbol of national unity. This is the leader of our nation. And Nairobi is not a state nation that lives aside of that. So Nairobi as the jewel of our country, when the deputy president says that the president and I will actually start being more concerned with what is happening here, is that they will not treat it like any other affair. After all, they all live here. They conduct their business here.
There's a process to it.
When they live here, the process here is that, number one, the management of public affairs is political. So there's no problem when, for example, we have got MCAs. UDA has got MCAs in the county assembly, right? The deputy president is the deputy party leader of UDA. When he says that his party leader and himself as the deputy will now start focusing on Nairobi so that it doesn't go to the dogs, he simply means one thing, that we are stakeholders, and he has a right to say so. We as UDA are stakeholders in Nairobi.
They no longer have control of the county assembly of Nairobi as a party, and that is why they see that Nairobi is not working optimally.
That is not entirely true of what he said. The concern about, you see, who is the governor of Nairobi? He's a UDA governor, right?
The governor himself has come out to say that he's being fought because he's working with the ODM party leader.
That's for the governor to defend.
Well, this is a party politics playing out. I'm not using my own words. This has been in the media of late. So it is down to an issue of parties, actually. it would appear it really has very little to do with anything else, the flood situation or the garbage situation in Nairobi. It is down to the county assembly and who has control of this county assembly, and it would appear that UDA as a party is uncomfortable with the balance of numbers in the county assembly of Nairobi and how the governor, Sakaja, is using those numbers.
Well, I will not agree to that statement from the governor. If you look at the state of Nairobi is not in any good taste to anybody. Nairobi is hosting the UN UNEP headquarters. The global headquarters is in Nairobi. I drove through that road last week, and you literally go through a river to be able to be at the headquarters as you come from the bypass. And then you ask yourself, what kind of image are we sending out there? Because I do not think there's any headquarters globally that is having that kind of a situation. The road is being constructed, is under construction, but it's very slow in terms of the way it's been done. Mud is splashing everywhere, all the way to the US Embassy. If you go along our rivers are stingy, and the garbage in this county or the city is actually stinking high. It basically tells you of a city that is sinking into garbage. And so I do not really think, when the president himself said that he's going to go into Nairobi to help, when the deputy president said we would not allow Nairobi to go the dogs, I think they are thinking beyond the party. I only said it could be the timing when the deputy president uttered these words. But then I think it will be wrong for Sakaja to go and hide in parties, to say it is because I'm working with the ODM. In any case, after elections, we're all becoming leaders to serve, not leaders to help our parties. So for him to start talking about the weaknesses of him working with ODM or the weakness of him working with Azimio, it is wrong. He should have actually talked about his ability to deliver, because that is what he asked for votes. He did not ask for votes in terms of whether he's going to work with who. He should have said, it's because I've performed very well that I'm being fought. Probably that will be a good statement for me. Or probably because I have not been able to perform, because that is what we are looking for. We are not looking for parties. So for him to run into parties and say, I'm being fought because I'm working with ODM, or I'm working with... That word for me is wrong, because his mind is still shrouded in political issues, and yet Kenyans do not look for politics now. Kenyans are looking for services.
But it's so politics. UDA...
well, it's true.
Yes.
It's true. There is politics now. UDA is doing its grassroots elections. Soon we will see ODM doing its grassroots elections. But that is not what Kenyans are looking for.
And whether or not Sakaja can actually be the
people in Nairobi, in Nairobi are looking for services. The people in my constituency are looking for services. At this point, if I start running with my weaknesses and say it's because of party all the time, at what point am I going to tell the people I'm delivering or not? I think the governor needs to come out very clearly and say, I have failed to perform, and so the president and the deputy wants to take over Nairobi, or I have performed, and so they're finding it bad for me to perform beyond their expectation, and so they want to take over. But for him to start saying, I'm being fought because of parties, for me, that will be very wrong for any leader that has been elected, because when we are seeking for elective seats, we tell people that we are seeking for this seat so that we can perform, not because of our parties.
But you cannot ignore the fact that the deputy president is not comfortable with the Sakaja getting the UD, and he has every right to it. It is all politics. He would prefer someone else to take over as or to be elected as the UDA branch chairman in Nairobi.
First of all, just before I respond to that, you know, UDA is not really concerned with who a governor elected on UDA works with, so long as they actually bring results to Kenyans. If the UDA agenda, if service delivery to the people is actually the end result of whatever they actually put out, even the president is working with people across the political divide. The president is working with governors from other ends. So this is a country that the political process, election is just a process through which we choose leaders, and thereafter the leaders then administer state to everybody. I do not think Sakaja is working with ODM. If his relationship with Sifuna is anything to go by, Sifuna is the Secretary General of ODM.
And as far as the County Assembly is concerned.
And when Sakaja came on board, he brought in a few people from ODM. UDA was still here. That was not a problem. So I think that excuse is a very lame one, for the simple reason that if he's working with ODM, is actually bringing results for Nairobians, all of us will not be having this conversation. Has his partnership with ODM delivered for the people of Nairobi? Has his working with ODM delivered for you and I? The complaints we're talking about here, the garbage in Nairobi is neither ODM nor UDA. The garbage in Nairobi is a nuisance to everybody else. Unplanned development, problems, I've been with a lie here, the problems that we see in Kileleshwa, in other places, those problems are neither ODM nor UDA. Those are Nairobian problems. So, to say that when people point out that there is a problem in the administration of the city, then you say you're being fought because you're working with ODM, for me, it's a bird without wings. It cannot fly. Because if he were partnering with ODM and he's delivering results to the people of Nairobi, probably the only results that are coming out of it are results to himself and not the people of Nairobi. Because if he were delivering to the people of Nairobi, we will not have that conversation. Again, this is politics. I have not heard anywhere where the deputy president has said that he's uncomfortable with Sakaja being the chairperson of Nairobi. The deputy president himself has actually said he had a conversation with Sakaja on phone and told him that our people who are stakeholders in the city are concerned with the way the city is actually going by. And that when they had that conversation, it was very cordial. So when we go round and round about this is a political process. And be it as it may, do we expect the deputy president, for example, not as a major stakeholder in the city?
And we made it, I clarified that he has all the rights to prefer anyone else or to prefer any individual to take over.
Again, probably it's time we ask some questions that people are not willing to ask publicly. Since Sakaja elected on UDA, how does he work with the party? How does he? I'm asking a question. I'm thinking the best question, his best response to the questions to the interviewer, how does he work with the party? How does he work with the MCAs? How does he work with the elected MPs in Nairobi on UDA? Do they consider him as one of their own?
Okay.
So those are the questions he should have responded to. Otherwise, whether he works with ODM or Safina or any other party doesn't really matter so long as he delivers to the people of Nairobi.
All right.
So any other thing, ni kupiga kelele.
Time for us to take a break. You're still watching Morning Cafe. Very interesting conversations here. We'll be back to continue with more, especially on the issue of wage bill, tomorrow being Labor Day. Do stand by for that.
Promoting insurance awareness with Insurance Regulatory Authority. Third-party insurance is mandatory under the law. It covers death or bodily injury to passengers, death or bodily injury to pedestrians, and damage to third-party property. Third-party policy does not cover loss or damage by fire, theft, and accident to the vehicle. It also does not cover the owner of the vehicle and the driver. Consider taking a personal accident to cover driver and owner of the vehicle. Motor vehicle insurance cover is not transferable. When you sell your vehicle, remember to cancel your policy. IRA, Bima Bora kwa Taifa. Read and understand the terms and conditions of your policy. This message is brought to you by IRA.
And we're back. You're watching Morning Cafe on TV 47 with me, Fred Indimuli. I'm still in studio with MP Titus Lote and Arnold Maliba, Strategic Communications Advisor for the UDA party. We now want to move to a different conversation. Tomorrow is Labor Day. This comes quick on the heels of quite a lot of discussions around the public sector wage bill. We have the National Wage Bill Conference. We have the ongoing doctor strike, which I think is on the 45th or 46th day.
47th.
The 47th day today. And we have very many discussions happening on how to contain the public sector wage bill. So many proposals have been put forth. One of them, very controversial, the proposal to actually change employment terms for public sector workers from permanent and pensionable to short-term contracts. And many people are skeptical and wondering, is that the right way to go? It is one of those radical proposals. Some may even call it extreme. And this has been voiced by even people as high up as members of the cabinet. Bwana Lote, I don't know, what is your sentiment, especially in as far as that proposal is concerned?
Well, I think the globe has reason to celebrate Labor Day. Every year we put one day, that is the 1st of May, to celebrate the labor that we've actually put to this world. And Kenyans have not been left behind. It's important as a country because you can see, if you look at our expenditure, you find that most of our expenditure goes to recurrent, and most of the recurrent expenditure goes to our pay. I would say we've reached a point where we are not able to continue with our development agenda if we continue in that trajectory, so that all our funding, all our money collected, all our consolidated fund, most of it goes to salaries. And so the reason why we are starting to think, how do we get out of this so that we can have some money for development? If you look at the monies that are going to the counties, they're supposed to appropriate 70% at least for recurrent and 30% for development. But over the recent past, if you look at the statistics coming from counties, there are counties that are paying as high as 98% on the recurrent. That basically tells you that that county is only receiving money from the exchequer and do nothing for the people. And the importance of us having this conversation, why we need to change this. But I think at the level where we now go to proposals that are obtuse, I'll say these are obtuse proposals that are out of this world, to turn everybody into contracts, I even do not think it is going to solve any problem. It's not going to solve the problem at hand. It's actually going to exacerbate it. Because if, for example, I'm earning 100,000 and my pay slip says I am permanent pensionable, P&P. Of course, there's nobody who is permanent in the world. We will all one time go back to Mecca. But the P&P does not mean that you're forever there. It basically means that you are secured. Your job is secured for you. That's basically what it means. When you turn it to contract, it basically tells you that your job is not secured. And that basically tells you that every periodic time, you're supposed to renew your contract. There's going to be a cost of renewing a contract. Either you're going to apply again, you're going to go through an interview, which is another additional cost. Yet, my salary will still remain the same because in this country, the labor laws does not allow you to earn less than what you've been earning. So whether I'm turned to contract or not turned to contract, the salaries of this country will continue being the same because we are going to pay the same figure. The only thing that we're going to get is we're now going to get additional cost of renewing the contracts. Why can't we just continue with what is there? Because I have looked through that proposal. I've tried to look at the economy of it. I've tried to look at the logic behind it as at what level does it reduce salaries. It does not make any sense. In any case, from the HR perspective, it's going to increase the cost of managing these contracts. And again, if you look at the people that are in contracts, people in contracts are supposed to earn more because their jobs are not secured. People that are in P&P are supposed to earn moderate because they are secured. So if I'm giving the security of a P&P, permanent pensionable, and my salary remains 50, I'll be very comfortable. But immediately I'm turned into a contract person. I'll ask for a higher salary because I do not know about tomorrow. And so in the moment we transit Kenyans from the P&P positions that are in to contracts, I'll tell you, there are going to be a lot of costs that are going to be coming with it. And then we're going to go to the reverse of what we are thinking we want to do. We're going to increase the cost of labor in this country more than what we are seeing now. So for me, I totally disagree with that. I do not even think there is any country in the world, probably they need to give us statistics, of any country in the world that has got all the people in contract. I have looked through it. I went search, at least through the search that I could. I did not see any of a country that everybody is on contract. Probably Kenya is going to be a statistics or a data that everybody else is going to refer to if we become successful. But let me tell you, from my perspective, from where I stand, that is dead on arrival. Nobody's going to agree on it.
It is still a proposal, Bwana Maliba, but it has been communicated by people very high up in government, meaning we cannot ignore it. What are your sentiments on this?
First of all, it's not true that governments across the world actually give their staff permanent and pensionable. this is a very colonial edict that has actually run around. It's not like it's a bad thing, but even you, Fred, here, you are on contract. Some of the most effective industries across the world are actually on contract.
The question is, can the public sector be run with an entire workforce that's on short-term contract?
I'm actually going there. Look at Singapore, for example. Look at how the civil service there is actually run. We actually love to laud Singapore, yet that is a framework that actually they've engaged. In the West that we love, somehow we love everything in the West except when it actually threatens our interests. So in the West, for example, even people who work in very sensitive sectors like CIA, people working in some of those clandestine spaces like the national intelligence spaces, those guys are on contract, yet they're handling very sensitive things. Today here, even our police officers work on contract. Why are we acting like it would be a new concept here? The police, guys who handle kinetics, even our soldiers are on contract. They renew after a period. There's a period where you get to...
There's no guarantee after...
There's no guarantee after... And these are people who are handling guns. These are people...
You say the military are on contract.
Even the... After 7 years, you actually go and renew. You choose to stay in. You are always given away an option of going out. The same to the police. The police even have got a window. I think when you get to 20 years, you can opt out and get your benefits or stay on. So these are people in sensitive spaces, are on contract. Why then would we want to have guys who are running clerical jobs, for example, on permanent and pensionable? You are here doing a very important job. But TV47 has not stuck on you. They've not bonded you. And you see, like for example, you bring in an officer in the military. You train the guy. Some of them you make them captains, you make them pilots and everything else. So that we actually get money out of it. We bond them for a period, and then we have got a window for where they can actually exit, even when we've trained them as engineers. So it's not entirely a new concept. I know we really want to make... And it's a good thing. This is a country that is, when we took on the Constitution in 2010, we accepted to be a participatory government. We love to consult. We talk to each other. So when the CS Moses Kuri actually goes out and says that this is the way we need to go, already we take up, I think it's 51 or 52% of what we raise that actually goes...
57%.
To that goes to
public sector.
To public sector. And how many of those guys are there? About 1.1 million people, right? So the over 24 million of us that work, because our workforce is about 24 million people. So that all of that workforce, whether in the formal or informal sector, raise up, and for all that we raise, up to 47%, as you have said, actually goes to just 1 million people. Is the service that is actually given commensurate with what we are actually putting in?
He raised a question on whether or not that would actually reduce the wage bill, or is it a route to eventually cut down on the number of people working within
I know
by failing to renew?
I know there are challenges on how you implement that proposal. I'll tell you, from a legal perspective, there would be a challenge. Number one being that when people are already on a contract, if you're going to undo that particular contract, there's going to be huge cost to it. It will be, so probably we can actually just change and come up with a framework where the next batch of civil servants that we actually bring in are actually put on contract, so that then eventually we phase out the permanent and pensionable team, except in critical sectors where we think for purposes of institutional memory, we might need a few people on PNP. Otherwise, contract is not anything that we should actually be frowning on. In any case, it improves performance. That you prove to us why we should actually like...
There are performance contracts, which even the permanent and pensionable play...
what happens to them if they don't meet targets? I've worked on boards, I've worked in public service, so I know that even when we actually sign those performance contracting and everything else, what happens to us when we don't meet them? Have you ever followed through to actually know when people sign the performance contracting, what happens to them if they don't meet targets? What will happen to you here, Fred, if you don't meet targets at Cape Media? You will actually either show cause on why we actually should retain you or not, right? But in public service, performance contracting is a ritual now. show me what has happened to people. And a lot of times the public are actually complaining about poor service from the public, from civil servants too. A lot of times, most of the conversations we are having here sometimes, even when we speak for government, a lot of times we are trying to explain service delivery gaps, especially from the public sector, right?
The question is, do you think, Bonalote, that short-term contracts could improve service delivery? Because yes, they've been used in the public, in the private sector extensively, and they say that probably that is a way to go. Do you think in the public sector short-term contracts could probably ensure that Nyayo House performs better?
Yeah, of course, short-term contracts will improve service delivery, without no doubt about that. But look at the cost that comes with that. And I've said it initially, and I'll say it again. The people that are in contract, even in the public, in the private sector, they earn much more than what the government employees on P&P earns. They earn much more. And basically, if you're transiting people from P&P to contract, of course, you expect them to perform better. You expect them to operate by the book, but you also expect them to earn more. And so if the reason why we are saying that we want to transit people from P&P to contract is because we want to reduce our wage bill, then we are wrong, because we'll definitely increase our wage bill. Probably the reason will the reason
help in getting rid of enough numbers, probably by failure to renew contracts after they expire. That probably that's the one way of ensuring.
But it will be wrong. It will be wrong for a government to do that so that they actually sack people and reduce employment. The reason why government is in place is so that they can also create employment. And you can see the president has been at painstaking to try to explain to people that we are saturated and that we should start looking for jobs outside. And the president has actually gone out there to look for jobs so that Kenyans can also go get jobs out there. And most of the jobs that they get out there is on contract. And so they are supposed to perform. If the reason why the minister was saying that we transit people from permanent to contract is because of performance, then I will 100% agree. But if the reason is what he said, that so that we can reduce the cost of labor, then it's wrong, because we are not going to reduce the cost of labor by taking people from permanent to contract. We are actually going to increase, because first,
unless you use the new way to actually fire people.
Yeah, if you want to fire, if the government is doing that so that they fire, then they need to come out clearly and tell us that we want to fire people, so we want to take you to contract so that we can fire you. But I don't think that is the object of any government. Okay. What the government wants to do is to create jobs, and I think the president is doing it. If the minister wants to fire people through contracts, that's very wrong, and I don't think the president will agree.
But even the president admitted that the public sector, the workforce is actually bloated, meaning that there's need to actually cut down on the number of people working in the civil service.
They need to have a proper way of cutting, but not transiting people to contract, because that way we're going to have labor being expensive.
Okay.
Well, the question of transitioning from P&P to contract is not entirely about the bloated workforce. It's about performance. When the CS Moses Kuria was actually at trade, he said he did not need the 3,000 people he was there, because he sat down, asked them what they wake up every morning and come to the office to do. You remember that conversation? Mm-hmm. He said that he has been in the Ministry of Trade. He has got about 3,000 staff. And he has asked them what they do every morning, come and go. And he realized that he didn't need the 3,000 people that were there. That is a CS who was raising a serious question. But then on performance here, you realize that there's a lot of lethargy in the public service. It's been a tradition. Even though I know that in the public service is where you will actually find some of the finest workers. When you talk about institutional memory, proper people at policy work, some of them, you might not get better people than some of the people in. Yet again, all senior positions in government are now on contract. You cannot be a director if you're not on contract, for example. So, again, this contracting business is not entirely a new concept in the public service. It is there.
The need right now is to cut down on the wage bill. And it's this proposal vis-a-vis the need of the moment, because the need is not really to improve on service delivery. Yes, there's always that need.
That is actually not the most urgent government actually exists
for... It is a national public sector wage bill and ways to reduce it.
Government actually exists for, number one, to facilitate service delivery. you cannot run away from that.
The cabinet secretary mentioned the fact that, and he also said he's uncomfortable paying only 1 million people 47% of the collectible revenue, meaning he's seeing the sense in actually executing this proposal vis-a-vis the public sector wage bill.
You look at it from that end, but purely from priming the public sector so that it actually can deliver effectively to the people of Kenya. You also need to bring in management tools that help you get the best out of it. By the way, the government does not exist as an employment bureau. For whatever reason you want to look at it, the government is a facilitator, an enabler, and not an employment bureau. So when we actually turn it into, because guys are there, of course, out of need, out of necessity, people get jobs in government. But it should be for need, it should be to serve purpose, not to create jobs as an end in and of themselves. So when we are bringing in this contracting, the proposal around contracting, it's not as bad as people really want to put it out there. I have just told you that some of the most effective industries are actually in places where people work on contract. At Facebook, for example, something that has actually changed the world, people work on contract. At Apple...
It is the running of government that people are more concerned about, because you mentioned that there are some critical areas where you would need people.
I said that should be, and not a blanket policy, because that blanket policy is what has actually earned us a lot of lethargy. Two, when you sit down and you realize that sometimes in a ministry, and you know these are conversations for people who've been in government who will actually tell you, that you will go to a ministry and realize that about just few people work so heavily. And the others who are just, you know, the concept of joyriding, it doesn't just exist in public policy on the other side where you're talking about, you have got guys who piggyback on others' efforts. The management of this bureaucracy that is government, you realize that in a department, you're going to have a few people working so hard, but the others, by the way, whether they perform or not, they're on jobs and they're fine. It's that we're trying to clean. So when you pay those particular individuals, what are you paying them for? But then because they have got jobs, we should protect jobs as if they're sacred. It's important. Let's actually say this. Labor Day, that is tomorrow, is actually belongs to workers, all workers, wherever they may be. It's important that workers celebrate Labor Day. They review where they've come from, look at the challenges they have, and try to plan ahead. I hope that tomorrow we can actually have a general increment and not just anything about...
At a time when we're talking about reducing the public sector...
Because one of those things...
expect any increment?
One of those things, when we talk about the proposal for a general wage increment, it's not because of other aspects or in spite of other aspects, but then it is because there has been inflation. The cost of living has been a little bit tricky. Even as government, we try to fix that. So we think that if we could share in this, because government is not the only employer, as much as the government is the biggest employer today. So when you look at that from that particular perspective, then you do not have a problem with a proposal for a general increment.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of disquiet, and this is a final question as you make your final comments. There's a lot of disquiet among the workers' unions around this time. In fact, tomorrow, as Kotu leads the main celebrations to mark Labor Day, other public sector unions representing public sector workers have decided they're going to have a parallel event to mark Labor Day as well. There's a lot of disquiet in a lot of things happening. Do you think this kind of disquiet, how do you think it's going to affect the general working of this administration at a point when the public sector wage bill is untenable and there's all this disquiet and the government is looking to do a lot of things at once?
Well, I think there is no positive outcome from any disquiet situation like we've got now, anywhere. Immediately you find that there are clashes in terms of how things are done, then definitely the result is always going to be negative. So I will really call on government to be able to be very vigilant in terms of all this and be able to solve some of the issues that the workers' unions, workers' representatives are saying. Because as much as everybody is waiting for that 100 shillings, 200 shillings increment in their salary, that does not be able to match the cost of inflation in this country. And so basically, nobody always celebrates about the increase of salaries. Despite the fact that it's going to be hyped, the salaries have been increased. Basically, when you look at it, it's very meager. So the president needs to become as tough as he's been in terms of looking into these issues. I think one of the things that we need to do, instead of even saying we are transiting people from permanent to contract, so that we sack them, because that is what I'm actually saying. They want to reduce, the redundancy. They want to reduce the idle workforce. He's actually mentioned about 3,000 people working in the Ministry of Labor who do not even know what they're going to do per day, which is also very wrong. I think what they needed to do is to just come out clean and say, if you have nothing to do, get out. But if you have something to do, be in. That is how it can be. Instead of saying subtly, we're turning you to contract, and then without you knowing, we are asking you what you're doing, and then we ask you to leave, because that is the end objective. What the government needs to do now, and I think the control of budgets need to take this by the horns. The control of budgets need to look at the counties, because immediately counties were formed. Counties became a recruitment bureau where people are, in fact, very unqualified people are supposed to be employed, because politically, if you supported me and I'm in the county government, then I will employ you. That's the reason why you find that cost of employment in counties have risen, so that to levels where you find 98% of the monies that are released to counties are actually going for salaries. So I think the control of budget, first of all, is to step up the game and say, we need this amount of money to go for recurrent expenditure, this amount of money goes to current salaries, and this amount of money then is supposed to go for development. If we do not do that, we're going to see this quiet with time, because we're going to have a bloated public service, we're going to have a bloated civil servants who do nothing, but then who are also still looking for money from government. Where does government get this money if there's no production? So if we continue on the trajectory we are continuing, and then we're going to have this quiet, we're going to have Labor Day celebrated here. Every county will have their own Labor Day. They will have their own complaints, because we are a situation where we only want to eat and not produce.
Okay.
So the control of budgets needs to say, until you are also able to produce, then you are also allowed to employ. Otherwise, we're going down badly.
And finally, Maliba, I'm looking at a statement here from quite a number of these unions, and this statement is signed by Secretary Generals of UKCS, KMPDU, Dock Workers Union, KUKO, KUPET, and the Kenya Aviation Workers Union, and they say they will be, including KUSU, TUK, KE, and UASU. All public sector unions will join demonstrations every Tuesday until the government complies, and they talk about issues to do with the unilateral threats to public servants, which we've talked about. Respect of CBAs, I know you're very passionate about that, and employment contracts entered into public servants by public servants on permanent and pensionable terms. You have exactly 3 minutes.
First of all, it's important to note that work is as old as mankind. Work ennobles people, that work gives you purpose. When we wake up in the morning and have got something to do, you have got purpose, you are healthy, even just by waking up to go and work. So it's important that we as a nation become a working nation. Even at independence, we were talking about uhuru na kazi, that for us freedom meant there is work, and we were to work for ourselves, that them that work this land, the land will actually reward them. But be that as it is, I think let's begin from this particular point. I have said this before, that unless a governor, when you are elected as a governor, that unless a governor has got some revolutionary ideas and concepts in the management of public affairs, then if they don't bring that in as an edge, they end up being just two things. A governor becomes a paymaster general, because he receives money, the 15% that comes from the national government, and then you are going to be paying salaries. And then the second thing that a governor becomes is the manager of pending bills. So unless, and a lot of us have actually elected, a lot of the governors we've elected out there are managers of pending bills and paymaster generals. They do not govern anything. They are just in charge of payrolls and juggling around pending bills. So And that is why after 3 months, you've gone round, you've done a lot of English speaking and everything else, then you start coming up with explanations because the people get tired. If you're not bringing in anything that can actually revolutionize how a county is actually worked around. After 3 months, people get angry with governors and then now they get this creative. You're seeing all manner of explanations, including who they work with and whom they don't work with. So, but then what has happened in counties is that they're bloated in because people turned county governments into employment bureaus again. That we employ you. So if you employ Lotte today to become a governor for Nairobi, what he does is that then the only performance he will do is to bring in new people to become all manner of jobs. Whether they are qualified or not, they are brought in. So we've turned counties into employment bureaus and then into events platforms where now every day people are not running government on programs, they are running governments on activities. So it's events. Event, as in if you're going to ask a CEC, what have you done? We did this event, we did this event, we did this event. Event management. So counties have become also event management platforms. So there is no governance. We are employing people and then we are holding events. That is how we succeed in running our counties. And that is why you realize that a lot of people are not feeling this county thing. Then PNP, you know...
Less than 30 seconds.
No, they have not even done a minute. But be that as it may. Really? On permanent and pensionable, let's say this. Why are we making it look like we, the people, owe the people who have been given PNP? They owe us services. Look at this. We are sentimentalizing this, and then it's now we are making it look like we owe them a job. They don't owe us services. That even if they don't perform, we should not raise that. By the way, they owe us service delivery way over and above their PNP thing. This CBA thing, I don't want to talk about it because...
You have talked about it before.
Because I have said, and the more I speak about it, the more angry doctors become out there. But I will still insist that the CBA was obtained fraudulently. It was gotten under duress. It is difficult to implement. No other person than Mutahi Kagwe, who is a former CS, under whose watch he was unable to implement it. He said the CBA as is unimplementable. But finally, I need to say this so that I'm not quoted out of context. We appreciate what the medics are doing. Their work is essential. I'm only asking them to go back to the negotiating table. The government has made offers. Rome was not built in a day. If we cripple government, they will not even have that particular CBA they're asking
out
for.
Of studio. Thank you so much, Arnold Maliba, a strategic communications advisor, UDA Party, and Titus Lotte, MP Kacheliba, our panelists this morning on State of the Nation. Now, the devastating toll from the ongoing floods crisis across the nation demands immediate and decisive action from this government. With the death count climbing steadily, surpassing 160 lives lost, and no end in sight as the weather forecasts predict more torrential rains in the coming days, it is abundantly clear that we are facing a national disaster of great proportions. The latest incidents in Maimahiu and in Garissa and others across the country point to the urgency of the situation. Families torn apart and communities devastated, the human cost of these floods is immeasurable. It is time for the government to acknowledge the gravity of the situation and declare a national disaster. This declaration would not only mobilize critical resources, but also send a clear signal that every available measure will be employed to confront this crisis head-on. The response must be far-reaching and immediate, from deploying emergency response units to affected areas to implementing proper mitigation strategies. Every effort must be made to safeguard lives and property. However, the burden of responsibility does not rest solely on the shoulders of the government. Civil society, NGOs, and the citizens alike must unite in solidarity to support those affected and contribute to the collective response effort. In times of crisis, leadership is measured by action. The government must demonstrate its commitment to the welfare of its citizens by prioritizing the flood response and providing the necessary support and resources to those in need. Delay is not an option. Lives are at stake, and every moment counts as the rains continue to pound. Let us stand together as a nation and confront this challenge with courage, compassion, and the unwavering resolve, because the time to act is now. That is a TV47 editorial comment this morning.
the Premier League, all on DStv.
Na safari hii katika Mfahamu Kiongozi tutakuletea viongozi aina mbalimbali.
Nikuwe na Nisani kama 10 na pia nikuwe menua minibus. Minibus niko niwa.
Kushinda unaangalia simu ya mzee, soma Biblia ama ingia kwa washroom ujisugue mpaka nimetoa hivi.
I don't know whether any of my children would want to get into the political field. Sijajua bado.
Kila Alhamisi saa 1:30 kuendelea.
Join us on a journey through the concrete jungles and rising skylines, where every beam, every nail tells a story of progress and vision.
In every aspect of life, you know, you have to look at several dynamics.
From groundbreaking,
Nowadays with the tech, you can check on different websites or you check online and you can see some inspiration. So at least that one would be a direction already. I'll know like what kind of style you're going for.
to finishing touches, witness the dedication of the hard-working teams who bring these ambitious dreams to reality. The Realtor, Tuesdays at 6:30 p.m.
Na safari hii katika Mfahamu Kiongozi tutakuletea viongozi aina mbalimbali.
Nikuwe na Nisani kama 10 na pia nikuwe menua minibus. Minibus niko niwa.
Kushinda unaangalia simu ya mzee, soma Biblia ama ingia kwa washroom ujisugue mpaka nimetoa hivi.
I don't know whether any of my children would want to get into the political field. Sijajua bado.
Kila Alhamisi saa 1:30 kuendelea.
Join us on a journey through the concrete jungles and rising skylines, where every beam, every nail tells a story of progress and vision.
In every aspect of life, you know, you have to look at several dynamics.
From groundbreaking,
Nowadays with the tech, you can check on different websites or you check online and you can see some inspiration. So at least that one would be a direction already. I'll know like what kind of style you're going for.
to finishing touches, witness the dedication of the hard-working teams who bring these ambitious dreams to reality. The Realtor, Tuesdays at 6:30 p.m.
Na safari hii katika Mfahamu Kiongozi tutakuletea viongozi aina mbalimbali.
Nikuwe na Nisani kama 10 na pia nikuwe menua minibus. Minibus niko niwa.
Kushinda unaangalia simu ya mzee, soma Biblia ama ingia kwa washroom ujisugue mpaka nimetoa hivi.
I don't know whether any of my children would want to get into the political field. Sijajua bado.
Kila Alhamisi saa 1:30 kuendelea.
Join us on a journey through the concrete jungles and rising skylines, where every beam, every nail tells a story of progress and vision.
In every aspect of life, you know, you have to look at several dynamics.
From groundbreaking.
Nowadays with the tech, you can check on different websites or you check online and you can see some inspiration. So at least that one would be a direction already. I'll know like what kind of style you're going for.
To finishing touches, witness the dedication of the hard-working teams who bring these ambitious dreams to reality. The Realtor, Tuesdays at 6:30 p.m.
Na safari hii katika Mfahamu Kiongozi tutakuletea viongozi aina mbalimbali.
Nikuwe na nisani kama 10 na pia nikuwe menua minibus. Minibus nikoniwa.
Kushinda unaangalia simu ya mzee, soma Biblia ama ingia kwa washroom ujisugue mpaka nimetoa hivi.
I don't know whether any of my children would want to get into the political field. Sijajua bado.
Kila Alhamisi saa 1:30 kuendelea.
Join us on a journey through the concrete jungles and rising skylines, where every beam, every nail tells a story of progress and vision.
In every aspect of life, you know, you have to look at several dynamics.
From groundbreaking.
Nowadays with the tech, you can check on different websites or you check online and you can see some inspiration. So at least that one would be a direction already. I'll know like what kind of style you're going for.
To finishing touches.
Right, welcome back. Now, earlier this month, Education Cabinet Secretary Ezekiel Machogu admitted that close to 70% of children in Nairobi County attend private institutions. And just last week, the CS also decried the high cost of private schools and asked the owners to lower the cost of education. So as a country, what is the state of cost of education in the country? And today on Biashara Tuesday, we are joined by Dr. Emmanuel Manyasa. He is Executive Director of Usawa Agenda for this particular conversation. And just to tell you who Dr. is, in case you're seeing him for the first time, going to be seeing him for the first time, he holds a PhD in Development Economics, holds a certificate in Grants Management from Strathmore University, a CPS Section 3 and certificate in Evaluating Social Programs from JPL, African Innovations for Poverty Actions. He'll be telling us all about that. Taught Development Economics, so he really understands as much as the whole cost of education and how it should really be priced. And he has also led the Uwezo program, basically conducting the citizen-led assessment of learning in Kenya. Quite the years and quite the hats in your plate. Karibu sana, Daktari.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
First of all, as Usawa, what does Usawa really do when it comes to matters education?
Usawa Agenda does research with a focus to promoting education justice in Kenya. We believe that our education systems, the way they are set up, are unjust inherently because they do not accord every child the opportunity that a wise parent will desire for their own child. And because of that, we think that we can change the way we offer education. We can restructure the systems of education and make them more just, make them guarantee that what a child emerges with from school reflects only their ability and their effort. At the moment, what one emerges with from school reflects very many other encumbrances that have nothing to do with the child's ability or the child's effort in school.
Right. And the vision for Usawa Gender is, and I quote, a world where every child benefits from quality education. And you've told us, I mean, as much as inherent problems that have been there ever since, prehistoric and post-independence problems that have been there. But for this vision, do you think, you'll obviously believe in the vision, but then do you think Kenyans are also true to this particular vision, a world where every child benefits from quality education?
Kenya is signatory to the Global 2030 Agenda. Kenya is signatory to the African 2063 Agenda. Kenya has its own Vision 2030, and Kenya has put in our constitution the fact that basic education is a right for every child. So Kenya has committed in word, in black and white, that they are going to offer every child an equal opportunity through education. Now, in terms of practice, there are gaps, and those gaps are what we are seeking to fill, so that we live up to the word that we have committed ourselves to.
Right. Dr. So even as you continue, let me take you through some data. First off, by a World Remit, a digital firm that says, so this was last year's report, showing that a Kenyan parent spends about 68,000 Kenyan shillings, 701 annually on a school-going child. As someone who understands matters economics, we'll be diving into more data, but then we can just take a look at that, first of all. So this reflects on just a school-going child, either be it private or public institution, but 68,000 for just a regular parent. What do you make of that?
First, we have to admit that education has never been cheap, ever since, and it cannot be cheap. So the problem is not the amount of money being spent. The problem is actually what we are getting in return for the amount of money that is being spent. Because on average, from the data that we have, the Kenyan parents foot 38% of the cost of education.
38%?
38%.
Okay.
And the government foots 54% of the cost of education. And then we have other actors, donors, footing the remaining about 8%
right.
of the cost of our education. So for me, the key issue is when parents are putting all these resources in education, how accountable is the education system to guarantee that they are getting value for the sacrifice that they're making to invest in their children?
So does it mean, and sorry to cut you, does it mean the higher a parent pays and knows that I'm going to be paying higher, they also expect a higher value? Because, I mean, as just starting earlier this month, the Education Cabinet Secretary Ezekiel Machugu was saying that 70% of parents in Nairobi alone are taking their children to private institutions. So does this mean this 70% are expecting that I'm going to be paying, let's say, 50,000 or even higher? Does that mean they're also expecting a higher value?
Yes and no. Yes and no, because we have parents paying 1 million shillings for children in primary schools in this country.
Okay.
And that is out of choice. And for those parents, they are actually expecting much higher value. The 70% that Waziri is talking about in Nairobi are people taking their children to low-cost private schools because they have no option. The government has not put up public schools in our informal settlements. So those parents have no option. It's no choice for them to take children in private schools, which actually sometimes amazes me that the government does not give those children in the low-cost private schools capitation. And yet they are the children of the poorest of the poor, especially in our urban centers. So I feel that we might convolute issues when we just look at the fact that the parent is paying. There are those paying out of choice, and they are paying as high as $1 million and more per year. And there are those paying 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 because they have no choice. They must pay because their children have no access to any other kind of school. So they have to go to private school.
Right. And actually on the same train of thought, something that had skipped in my mind, taking a look at, so this is the cartoon on yesterday's paper of Daily Nation. And I would like your honest analysis on this cartoon, showing, you could actually tell us what you see on this cartoon.
Yeah. This is a debate we've had for a long time since the government implemented the free primary education in 2003. The objective at that time was good. We had a lot of children who had dropped out of school because of lack of fees, and the government promised it will offer free primary education. There was a lot of goodwill from the international community, and we got a lot of support, especially from World Bank and others, to get children into school. Once we had gotten children into school, we needed to go another step further and now guarantee that they are not just attending school and growing up in school, but they are actually learning while in school. We did not go to that level. So a lot of public schools became growth centers where children just went to grow. And so our assessments were showing children who are leaving class 8 and they cannot read a class 2 story. So they were just growing up. And that is how, if you look at the history of private schools in Kenya, until 2003, we didn't have very many private schools in Kenya, but private schools expanded when free primary education was introduced. Instead of anyone else expecting that they will shrink because parents will take their children to the public school, which was now free, they expanded. Why? Because there was no learning happening in the public primary schools, and parents were forced to look for alternatives. And that is how the private school started to expand, especially at the primary level. So it is a conversation we need to have. We haven't addressed the issues that made public primary schools become growth centers where children don't learn. And we need to make sure that we enable those children to learn, because it is actually an unjust act to force a child into a school and keep them there when they are actually not learning. It's unfair to that child.
Right, and as you can see, I think someone, probably a teacher, someone just telling this child, out, go get school fees. And this is probably something that we expect to see even when schools reopen for the second term. But then there's a free education, you've touched on it. I'd like for your, what do you think about the whole philosophy of free education when it started, the whole ideology when it was first?
First, I think it was, the word free education is a misnomer, because there is nothing that has value that is free. In this case, actually, what we have is publicly funded primary education, so that the taxpayer pays for primary education. It's not offered free, but the taxpayer pays. So the philosophy was good. The whole idea is good. It's actually part of us living our constitutional promise to children, that we will get all of them to benefit from free and compulsory basic education. It's a constitutional promise to every child, those living now and those who will be born in future, unless we amend the constitution. So because we have made this promise, we had to bring in resources from the taxpayers to pay. And that idea was good, because every child in this country deserves to have their talents developed and harnessed for the development of the country. So the problem has been that we have thought that there are people or children who deserve low quality and those who deserve high quality. And we have said, let those who want high quality pay, and those who who cannot pay get low quality. And I think that is a problem. We need to be focusing on making the school system to deliver the same quality of education to every child. Whether they attend public or private school, there should be no difference. So the quality of education access should be the same.
So probably the initial structure of how the free education, as you're saying, is an anomaly, was probably the issue. How it was first concepted, the initial structure of it.
No, there was no problem. We just lost focus at some point.
Okay.
It was okay to start it the way it was started, to say, we have all these many children outside of school, let's get all of them in school. Once we got them into school, it was clear that one, the teachers were being overwhelmed, so we needed to focus on getting enough teachers into those schools. We didn't do that. To this day, our schools still face huge teacher shortages. We needed to focus on, can we make the learning facilities in the schools be conducive? We still have schools where toilets are a problem.
Oh, yes.
And that in itself makes learning difficult. We needed then to go beyond that and say, can we provide school feeding? I went to school during Nyayo days and we had milk in school. And much as people may not really think that was something, it was something. For children who were commuting from long distances and couldn't go home for lunch, that packet of milk was very useful. So we need to think. By now, actually, we should have sorted out issues of teachers, sorted out infrastructure in schools. We should be grappling with, can we provide children a meal in school?
Right.
Per day.
Right. As we continue, just taking a look at the data. So taking a look at the one for World Remit. I want us to also take a look at a survey done and a report released by the Florida State University back in 2017, showing that private schools cost parents, that was about $80 by that time. So that's about 11,376 shillings, thereabout. And for a public school is about 6,541. So that's in 2017. And when you take a look at now over the years, this has definitely changed. But I want to get into even the private schools, which when we started, you're saying it's twofold. Either parent decides they don't really have a choice because around their locality there's no public school, or they actually just decide, I'm going to take my child to school. And over the years we've had quite the number of private schools really mushrooming. Do you think at some point these private schools saw the gap that, these parents don't really have a choice? So it turned out to be a money minting scheme and a platform for them.
Whoever does any business without the motivation of profit, if anybody goes into business, they are motivated by profit.
Do you think? Do you think this was clouded by the fact that the real value for education?
I don't think so, because even those who run private hospitals, much as they are saving lives, they are in making money for themselves. So that is the bottom line. Anyone who is in business is motivated by profit. So the challenge for those who set up private schools, especially in our informal settlements, it's not for them. The challenge is for government to put up public schools and fund them and give parents a choice whether to now go to private school or to be in public school. For those in those areas, parents have no choice. When you have no choice, you are a captive customer.
Zodectary, last week on Sunday, Education Cabinet Secretary was urging private school owners to lower the cost of education and just tell them, just telling them and decrying the high cost of tuition fees that is in these private schools. This is coming even from the government. What is your sentiment?
That is as useful as transport minister telling matatu operators to lower the fare. It's just a story, to achieve whatever he thought he wanted to achieve. For some private schools, those really high cost, the reason they operate is because they are high cost. I am a student of economics. I know that certain commodities are sold because the buyers want exclusive status.
So does this mean
so if you tell someone who runs a very high cost school, a school which parents have chosen because it is high cost and it will be exclusive to lower the fees, you are telling that fellow to close the school because the parents who go there want exclusion. That's why a parent will pay $1 million shillings for a child in primary school because they want that child to be in an exclusive school where they won't interact with everyone else. It is a clear choice. If that school is made affordable to everyone else, that parent will pull their child out of that school. They wanted exclusion. So private schools are run on the basis of what do their customers want. And those customers are the parents. If he was talking about the low-cost private schools, those low-cost private schools are not minting money. Some of them are barely surviving. That is how, when COVID came, many of them closed.
They closed, but generally,
because they are barely surviving. Okay. So if he was thinking about those ones, he's misguided. If he's thinking about the high-cost ones, they exist because they are high-cost. So his statement was neither here nor there.
But generally, as you say, your analysis of it sort of, remarks that would be similar to a toothless dog. But so what powers does the government have when it comes to, now generally, be it the lower cadre private schools as well as even the upper cadre schools? To what extent does the government have a hand in when it comes to even the regulation of, let's say, the fees? Because, I mean, at the end of the day, we are talking about having an equal...
Government should focus on running public schools well, establish them everywhere, and give parents a choice. So that if a parent chooses to go to a private school, they have a reason why they have gone there. And it is not the business of government to deal in customer-client relations.
Okay.
It doesn't, government has no capacity to engage in that, and it shouldn't try to engage in that. Focus should be establish public schools where they are lacking and run them well, and let parents make a choice on whether they want to go to private or to public.
On the bit of running them well, we have now over the years the introduction of the competency-based curriculum, the CBC, really just trying to have an equal playground on that. First of all, before we actually even dive into more on that, what is your view so far on the introduction of CBC? Because so far, when you take a look at even most of this data, it really showed the 844 kind of system and how the cost of education for this 844 was. But then now we're having another system here, the CBC system, which parents are really crying, hey, CBC is very costly. Your child tells you, lazima ununue sijui vitu kama ngapi, all that. What's your view on CBC?
First, the introduction of CBC was necessary. Yeah. Because 844 was a wasteful system.
Okay.
Yeah. People have romanticized it, and I have asked myself, why don't they tell us? For the last 7 or so years, 65% plus of all candidates who sit KCSE in Kenya score D+ and below. Why don't they tell us what happens to those people? If you haven't told us what happens to the D+ and D- and D planes and E's that this country has produced in hundreds of thousands. If you don't tell me what happens to them, you don't know what you're talking about when you say, let's keep 844. Yeah. So that is, it was necessary to change the curriculum. Have we implemented it well when we changed? No. We skipped important stages in curriculum reform process, and we have caused confusion in the implementation process. So some of the things parents are being asked to do are based on misunderstanding of the curriculum by the teachers, because teachers were never prepared for implementation. They were never trained properly for implementation.
So in your view, was it rushed? Did we rush the implementation of CBC before?
Of course, yes, we were not ready. We didn't follow all the stages expected to follow when reforming a curriculum.
And right now, when parents are, as you're saying, really decrying the fact that they don't really understand what is going on when it comes to the whole CBC. Because we're taking a look at the overview and analysis of how a parent would choose to take their child to, let's say, not for the 844, but then now here's a CBC kind of system. Has CBC lined the playground for both public and private?
No, because right now the children in junior school, in private schools are learning, those in public schools are just growing up. Because of haphazard implementation, we have not leveraged CBC to level the playing ground for children. That is what it sought to achieve. It can still achieve that, but we need to take a lot of serious action in redressing the gaps in our public school system in terms of implementing CBC. And
I think one of the biggest questions and statements that Kenyans would really say is now education is for the rich. Because if let's say a family is planning to have children, one of the biggest factors they're taking a look at is school fees. I need to have, let's say, 2 children because I'm going to be paying school fees for these 2 children on the same. Countries in Europe and all that, it is something that parents don't really have to worry about. Will we ever reach to this level? What do we need to do so that even for a parent who knows that I'm planning to have 4 children in this household, I don't really need to worry about how much school fees I'm going to be paying for these 4 children?
It is not also true that in developed countries, people don't have to worry about school fees. If you go to UK, if you go to the US, young university students worry a lot about student loan. You get the loan, but you repay it for very many years after you get employed. So it's not true that people don't worry about school fees outside of Kenya. People worry about school fees.
Are there things that European nations and even some other African countries have done that Kenya can really pick up from?
Among them is...
You probably tell me, because I mean, as a researcher,
I am just trying to clarify to you that the notion, which sometimes have been propagated, that outside of Kenya school fees is not a problem, it's not true. School fees is paid all over the world, and in many places they pay more than we do. But that is not to say that we don't have a right as Kenyans, because we have put in our constitution, enshrined in our constitution, the right to education for every child, that we don't have a duty to make sure every child has access. My view has been that government is the chief guarantor of this right, but government doesn't have to do everything. Government needs to provide proper guideline and say, it is going to cost this child this much to be in school and to get the right quality of education that we want for the child. The government is able to contribute this much towards that. And then be able to highlight clearly what the gaps are and invite other actors to fill up those gaps. Those actors could be parents. Those actors will be just well-wishers in community who know that this child is brilliant, they are able to excel in school, government is supporting them to this extent, but they have this gap that needs to be filled and well-wishers can fill. Those people will be development partners who support education. We have a lot of development partners supporting education to a very significant level in this country. Those will be local philanthropies who are generating resources and supporting. It will be private individuals. I know so many people in this city who are paying school fees for many children who are not their own. Some of them paying fees for children they don't even know, but they know about. Yeah. So I think that the biggest failure on the part of government is pretending that it can do everything in education when it can't, and refusing to own up where the gaps exist, highlight those gaps, and invite other actors to be able to join it in filling those gaps.
And Dr. even the whole spirit of the government, the national government, really, as you're putting it, wanting to do every single thing. Right now, your view on the devolved system of education, because even for counties would have the control of the ECD centers. Schools would really have to depend on the national government. Last year, the president's budget had, for education itself, had the highest allocation of it. But then when it trickles down, parents don't really feel where all this huge amounts of budget for education really went. You'd have, we've had parents really lining out to take the bursaries, the CDF bursaries, and they're asking, pesa school fees iko wapi?
I'm not so sure that I get your question properly, but let me try to answer it the way I understood it.
My question is your view on the devolved functions of education and the devolved education as it is. How counties are really taking up education?
There are two things that are devolved. We have ECD and we have TVET that are devolved. So in the ECD, county governments hire the ECD teachers and they manage ECD centers. And my own view has been that all the teachers in basic education sector should be hired by the Teacher Service Commission for standardization. I don't think counties should be hiring ECD teachers. That's why if you go across the country, you find very diverse salary scales for ECD teachers. Instead of having a uniform salary scale, you find different calibers of ECD teachers in different counties. I think that is not a good thing. I think that all teachers should have been, the hiring of all teachers should have been left with the TSC, and then counties manage infrastructure and issues like school feeding, which are necessary for children in that age bracket. We have also devolved TVETs, and counties are on diverse scales in terms of how they have performed in managing the TVETs. Some have done very well, better than maybe the national government will do. Some have done worse than the national government will do. So because they are independent governments, they have also produced very different results in terms of what they have done.
Right. You're really pushing even for the government to have more public schools within a locality. Taking a look at in most areas, you'd find in different slums, for example, Mukuru Njenga and such like areas around Nairobi, for example, there'd probably be like, let's say 10 private schools around one area and only one public school, which is probably quite far. This, even as the government is really pushing for 100% transition. We've seen the Education Cabinet Secretary really pushing for this 100% transition from those who do the Class 8, which was the last cohort, getting into Form 1. Just having as many of them getting into now the Form 1 slot. But then how properly can the government even have more public schools to really cater for this cost of education?
First, the requirement for more public schools is not a generic one. There are places where we have more public schools than we need. So some of them are totally underutilized with small numbers of children. But provision of education is a public service. And public services are provided to people, not spaces. So if you have an area, an informal settlement that has hundreds of thousands of people settled there, it follows that they require more schools for you to be able to provide education to all the children there. Services follow people. We need schools that are commensurate to the population densities of the areas that we are talking about. Yeah, and so for me, that is just supposed to be the natural thing, because 100% transition is not just an agenda of the ministry. It's a commitment in the Constitution. Basic education is a right to every child, and basic education is defined as ECD up to secondary school. So naturally, we have to have the 100% transition, because before children have finished high school, they have not completed basic education, which is supposed to be mandatory.
Right. And let's also focus on, for those, for the now people living with disabilities, as Usawa agenda, the kind of research that you're doing, how is the map out of the kind of schools catered for children living with children with disabilities?
The policy of government for the last few years has been to increase the number of integrated schools, which is a policy we support, that we get children with disabilities in the same schools as children without disabilities. For the reason that we should not continue creating special schools for children with disabilities, because there are no special societies where they're going to live after special school.
Okay.
They need to be in school with their differently abled children, so that they can be able to understand each other and be able to live in harmony and in support of each other. That effort has taken a long time to realize, because there are very few teachers in the normal schools that have been trained on special needs education. So the process is slow, but the process is supposed to happen, is desirable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does this start from a particular age, or until let's say this learner?
The integration is from primary. We are supposed to integrate children with special needs with children without special needs in the same schools. In some cases, there has been special units set up in these regular schools, for the reason that maybe the children have certain levels of disability that cannot allow them to sit in an integrated class. And so there will be a special unit, but within an integrated school, and which I still support. I think it's a good idea. We still have a lot of special schools, because it has been slow, first of all, for the society itself to accept. Remember, we are coming from a background where there was stigmatization of children with disabilities. And so some parents of children with disabilities have themselves not been keen on taking their children to integrated schools because of fear that their children will be stigmatized. But I think that is a process we have to allow to continue. We have to continue to educate the adults and the children in our communities that having another child with a disability is not, disability is not inability and does not make someone less human in any way. And that education needs to continue, so that in the long run, we have most of our schools being integrated and all our learners learning together, except for those who may have very severe disabilities and who require to be in special units within integrated schools.
Under the eyes of matters cost, when you take a look at now for this integration, will it alter, do you think it will alter how, let's say, one will be required to pay school fees? Do you think some of this would be a factor?
I don't understand what you mean by alter the cost or alter the process of paying fees.
Yes, I mean, let's say the whole integration, and you having learners who are required to use Braille, learners who are required to use specific modes of learning in the same integrated school.
Even now, government is is paying different capitation amounts for children with disabilities in integrated school. All the head teacher needs to do is to file returns on how many children with disabilities are in the school, and they receive a different amount of capitation. The amount they receive is slightly higher than what the other children receive, but it's far, far inadequate. And so for me, the idea is, how do we fund children with disabilities adequately to make sure that they are able to get the right assistive devices, they are able to get the right technology to use. Braille is a good technology, but it's outmoded.
Yeah.
We have better technologies now for children with visual impairment. And I think that should be the discussion. How do we make sure that we can compute the actual cost that is needed and provide that funding to schools so that they can support children with disabilities adequately?
Right. You're talking about the capitation of the funds now to the schools, and we've had this in news outlets, the fact that the delay of the disbursement of this capitation. And I mean, this learner is really expecting and just waiting for this capitation. In your analysis, how much of a danger can this really affect when it comes to the delayed disbursement from the national government?
Of course, delayed disbursement hurts schools. It is the reason you see these cartoons, you see children still being sent home despite on paper education being free at that level, because the school head faces a practical problem. They have to run the school. They have to pay for water, they have to pay for electricity, they have to pay suppliers of various commodities to the school. And when government has delayed to send money, the principal has to turn to the parents and tell them, give us money to fund the operations of the school, because the money that was promised by government is not coming. And if it hasn't come, suppliers will not want to listen. And they still have to be paid for services provided. A lot of schools have teachers employed on the board of management terms. They have to be paid, those teachers. And so, yeah, that is how you see school fees being charged, and that is how you see children being sent away from school for school fees.
Right. Before I get your final thoughts, the Uwezo program, and I mean, you really led the Uwezo program, is taking a look at how the state of the education in the country. Could you tell us how the state of education is and the cost of education is, and what you really learned, and the kind of gaps that we really need to, and what parents and even educators really need to know?
We stopped running Uwezo 4 years ago, but we now run Usawa Agenda, which was formerly Uwezo.
Yeah.
And based on the surveys that we've done between 2020 and now, several things. One, we have challenges with the number of teachers in our schools. A lot of our schools have inadequate teachers. A lot of those schools have board of management teachers. And board of management teachers present two problems to the school. One, they present a demand on the budget that is not covered by government capitation, and so the school principal and the board chair must talk to parents to pay. But also having board of management teachers actually presents three problems. The first one is the financial demand. The second one is the fact that they are less motivated than the other teachers because they are paid less, and yet they are as qualified as the other teachers. The third problem is that they are always moving. As a head, you hire 5 board of management teachers now. In 2 months, TSA advertises to hire. They all apply. They all get hired in other schools. You have to start looking for new board of management teachers. Before you finish orienting them, they are recruited elsewhere. So that turnover makes curriculum delivery a big challenge for schools that are having to depend on these board of management teachers.
Right.
So that is one problem. The second problem is, of course, the delayed sending of capitation.
Yeah.
which has gotten many schools into debts. Some schools cannot maintain a certain minimum standard of sanitation in the schools. We just finished releasing the report of our survey last week, and you will see that there are schools which we just rated as dirty when we went around collecting data, because they are unable. If a school is going to miss water a few days in a week, they are actually not able to keep their toilets clean. They have fewer toilets than they need, as per the number of learners. And many learners are using these toilets without sufficient amounts of water to keep those toilets clean. So they are unable to maintain certain minimum sanitation standards, which is a problem. We have schools that are also just poorly run. Yeah, so you have a board of management chair who is interested in being an entrepreneur and supplying to the school. You have a head teacher who is himself or herself busy trying to be the supplier in the school.
And the government had warned her about this.
And yeah, government always warns. but they know that these things are happening. And when these things happen, the school is shortchanged of money. They don't get value for whatever deliveries that are made by these school managers who are now doing business with the schools. That is a big challenge, and it's out there. I think they know. But I think that the biggest challenge is that we have refused to allow parents to play a role in school.
All right.
The Basic Education Act provides for establishment of a National Parents Association that goes up to the school level. We have a National Parents Association that exists in Nairobi. They have been given an office by the ministry. They have not been funded to operate, and they have been denied the right to collect some minimum fees from parents. All membership organizations are run and funded by members. The teachers' unions receive dues from teachers. Head teachers' associations receive dues from head teachers that enable them to run. How is the Parents Association supposed to run? Government has given them an office. Without money to run even that office, leave alone to run branches across the country that are supposed to be collecting the views of parents and supporting them to respond and to ensure their effective participation in the school system. That's a big challenge. I think that the government has undermined the Parents Association, and that's a big problem. It needs to be resolved. The Parents Association can be allowed to collect 10 shillings from a parent annually, 10 shillings per year. I don't think there's a parent in this country with a child in school who is too poor to pay 10 shillings in 1 year to support the Parents Association.
And real quick before I take the viewer to Kisii County to link up with Kombo Alfayo, for this Parents Association, how far do their powers go when it comes to even deciding and even a whole dialogue with the school owners when it comes to the fees that is needed, the tuition fees? How far do their powers go?
They are recognized by law and are required to support the schools on resource mobilization and support schools on issues of discipline. I think that mandate is limited. It needs to be broader than that. But at least they should first of all be given space to discharge the mandate that has been given to them by the law. And then they can talk about whether that mandate needs to be expanded. I think the mandate needs to be expanded.
Right.
Yeah.
Before I get your last thoughts, allow me to take the viewer to Kisii County, where Alfayo Kombo is, and just talking about matters banana farming, as we do every single Tuesday, matters innovation. Alfayo Kombo, very good morning to you. What do you probably have for us? Right. Before now, we'll be crossing over to him. Give us your final thoughts as we now probably take a short break.
I think that we have allowed what were small issues in the education sector to fester and become crisis. Junior school issue is now a crisis. We need to sort that out. We need to sort out the fact that the courts have ruled that intern teachers is an illegal creation, and we need therefore to quickly figure out a solution to that. It's urgent. I think that we need to settle quickly the issue of what is a junior school. It is not going to do well as currently set up in a primary school. It needs to be settled in a secondary school. Yeah. And these teachers who have been hired as intern teachers transferred to those secondary schools as full-fledged secondary school teachers. I think we will be helping to resolve the junior school issue, because junior school is very critical for the CBC. It is where the parents and the teachers engage together with the learner to guide the learner on career pathways. Interns cannot guide children on those pathways. Interns cannot engage with parents. We need experienced teachers teaching learners in junior school, and that needs to happen soon. And we need to quickly plan for grade 9, because grade 9 is just slightly over 6 months away. Yeah. And we haven't started to plan for it.
All right, thank you very much, Executive Director of the SAR Agenda. Thank you very much, Dr. Emmanuel Manyasa, for all this conversation, the wise bits that you've given us, even for every stakeholder in the education realm, as well as the government on the scene. We'll take a short break. When we come back, I'll be telling you more on what to expect right here at Morning Cafe.
Is your school bag ready? It's the Naivas Kikapu Kibonge Super Safari. With the widest choice, the biggest deals, the highest loyalty points ever at your Naivas Kiloko. A hard right for the books at the back. Ni njia ya kikweli kurudi shuleni. Naivas Kikapu Kibonge Super Safari. Back to school stay. Walisema hatuendi mbali. Naivas saves you money.
Hi there, my name is Dr. George Washuri. I am here to present to you a wonderful place you can build a retirement home. Where else other than Ocean View Ridge, Vipingo by Optiven? This property is well manicured. We have a perimeter wall. We are doing a swimming pool. We just concluded a beautiful entry gate. Only 2 miles to the ocean. Do you want to retire in the coastal region? Call this number 0790 300 300. The best property ever.
In a world where barriers seem overwhelming, there are those who defy expectations and go beyond the limit. Join us for an inspiring journey as we shine a spotlight on the extraordinary stories of courage, resilience, and triumph. Prepare to be inspired, moved, and uplifted.
And you speak so well. What do you want to be when you grow up? Tell me, a journalist. No. What?
I want to be a musician and a teacher.
You have a neighbor, a friend, somebody who you know has a child with Down syndrome. Get to know that person, talk to them, get to know the child, because it's a way of you creating awareness for yourself and understanding these are children like your children.
Beyond the Limit, every Saturday at 8 p.m.
This and every Sunday, we bring you the hottest gospel show in town. Let's go!
Indeed, it is the day that the Lord has made, and we rejoice and be glad in it. It is a very good day.
Some of us say that we are Christian because we say that Jesus is our Lord and Savior, but do we know the Bible? Do we know what the scripture says?
All through my life, it has been God who has been moving me from one place to another.
See you on Sunday.
When someone chokes, advise them to cough. And if this is not effective, bend them forward and give them about 5 back blows to try and clear the blockage. And if they're still choking, give them up to 5 tummy pushes by holding them around the waist and pushing inwards and upwards above their belly button. If they are still choking, call for medical assistance.
Get ready for a whirlwind of fun, where imagination knows no bounds.
I school at the most intelligent school in this world. That is why I go to school.
Adventure awaits as we dive into enchanted tales and explore far-off lands.
Since the sage and his wife did not have any children, they decided to keep the mouse as their child.
Let us also stir up some deliciousness.
Ensure that the butter, this is what we call butter, ensure that it's smooth enough.
And feel the rhythm. Our musical adventures groove to catchy tunes. Sing along, dance, and let your inner rockstar shine. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. on Kids on the Block, where playtime meets learning and friendships bloom.
Welcome back. This is Morning Cafe, #Biashara Tuesday. We're discussing matters banana farming, and I'm taking you all the way to Kisii for that conversation where Alfayo Kombo is. He's holding 3 seedlings of bananas. Alfayo, as our folks say, wakire.
Wakire we are.
What do you expect from your side?
Thank you very much, Stanley Yarigita. From my side, you'll be expecting that. I know many Kenyans eat matoke, eat sweet bananas, plantain, but without withstanding to know that where do this plantain or banana, the full process until it's on their table, the delicacy ready to be eaten. And today I'll be explaining to, I'm delighted to have one great agro plant farmer who is with me here, who is indulging in a lot of farming, both from the lab, from the farm, to finally having the end product that is a banana plant that you can see with me, that is there, full-grown banana. If you may allow me, pengine niweze kukuelezea kama ulivyoweza kuona kwamba hasa siku hii ya leo mtazamaji wetu wa runinga hii ya TV47 baada ya kipindi hiki atakuwa anaweza kujua hali ambayo ndizi inazidi kukua kutoka pale wakati tunatoka kutoka mahabara mpaka wakati inakuwa ndizi kubwa kama tunavyozidi kuiona pale nyuma yangu. Na nami hapa nitakuwa nimejumuika, niko na mkulima Cyrus Nyakundi ambaye atakuwa anatuelezea mbinu mbalimbali ambazo anazidi kufanya. Ni kwa nini aliweza kuamua kuingia mbinu hii ya mahabara? Pengine uweze kusonga hapa karibu ili kuweza kusaidia zao hili la ndizi, hasa wakati uliona kwamba ndizi hizi za asili ya Kisii ambayo tunajua kwamba hapa eneo la Kisii, famous land of matoke, inajulikana kupitia ukulima huu wa matoke. Atakuwa anatueleza, pengine utueleze jina lako ni nani na hasa ukulima huu ulianza vipi na ni nini kipi ambacho kilikuvutia wewe kama ukawa agro plant farmer?
Asante sana. Kwa majina ni Cyrus Nyakundi Mariba. Cyrus Nyakundi Mariba ni mkulima wa ndizi kutoka Kisii, na ukulima nafanya almost the complete value chain. Sasa hii ukulima number 1 nilianza sababu kulikuwa na gap. Sababu nilikuwa nafanya with one of organization in Nairobi, ilikuwa inashughulika na hii mambo ya tissue culture banana and the process and the whole of the process. Sasa Kaliro, Kisii na wakulima kutoka Kisii walikuwa wanakuja mpaka Nairobi kutafuta ndizi. That's why tulikaa na Kaliro wakasema sasa mbona usilete hii kitu pale Kisii, sababu wakulima wanahitaji kwa wingi ili wakapate wakiwa karibu and to reduce the cost of transportation. Ndio maana niliingia nikaongea na wao, tukakubaliana, tukaanza kazi ikiwa Kaliro and the Ministry of Agriculture wana promote product ya ndizi ikiwa karibu na wakulima. Tukaendelea sasa, vile tuliendelea tukaona production demand increase. Sasa nasi lazima tungeingia ku increase the production. Ndio maana niliingia nikanunua the facility of tissue culture, banana tissue culture lab. Hiyo tissue culture lab sasa inatusaidia, tunaweza kutengeneza mandizi enough ambayo tunahusia wakulima hapa Kisii na maeneo yenye iko karibu na Kisii.
Kwa sababu umeweza kuzungumza ukisema kwamba tissue culture lab, pengine mtazamaji wetu pale nje bado hajapata ufasaha mzima pengine kuweza kuelewa tissue culture lab ni nini. Pengine kuweza kutuelezea kutoka hapo mwanzo, je, ile process ambayo inatumika ili mpaka ndizi hii iweze kutoka pale wakati umeipanda, tunaona kwamba makaratasi ambayo unatumia kutoka umepanda hivi, umetoka pale kwa lab mpaka ikatoka hapa, ili iweze kufika mpaka kiwango kama hiki. Hebu pengine uweze kuelezea mtazamaji wetu hiyo process ni gani?
Kawaida kabla niingie kwa process, ndizi wakulima walikuwa wanachua ni kungoa alafu napanda. Pati sasa tukiangalia kuna ndizi ilikuwa inaitwa apple banana, tunaichua kama wanchare cake ama sweet banana, sweet banana
ama sukari.
Sasa mandizi kama hiyo imepotea sababu ya magonjwa. Tukiingia kwa hii teknolojia ya tissue culture, ni njia ya kupropagate tupate a green planting material yenye tutapanda mkulima aweze kuenjoy mapato na kuincrease mapato na kupata mazao ya hali ya juu, ili akaweza kuendeleza biashara. Sasa hii teknolojia inafanyika kwa rap, na kusikia rap kila kitu ni sterilization. Sasa kawaida tunafanya haya, tuko na a certified mataproc. Hiyo ni kulingana na sheria ya serikali. Ukipropagate mandizi kwa rap lazima uwe na green planting material. Sasa tuko na mataproc mahali penye tumepanda mandizi different varieties zenye ziko high demand kwa market. Hiyo samba iko pale Matieko Mosocho. Hapo sasa iko certified. Pale ndio tunaenda tunangoa ndizi tukifollow the characteristics of a good yielding banana. Tunangoa, tunaileta pale kwa rapu. Pale kwa rapu mliona tulikuwa na 5 sections. Section ya kwanza tukiingia pale ndio tunaosa ile saka. Ile saka tumengoa kama ile yenye inapandwa, lakini tukifuata characteristics za produce high yield. Sasa tunaiosa vizuri na sabuni inang'ara, ndio sasa tunaanza kuitrim. Tukitrim inakuwa ina size, tunafanya sterilization, sasa ndio inaingia kwa wrap. Hapa kwa wrap kuna ile tunatengeneza chakula. Unajua sasa nje tunatumia mchanga, lakini kwa wrap tunatengeneza ile chakula iko na madini ambayo inahitajika kwa ndizi, lakini tunatumika hizo nutrients, micronutrients, ions and vitamin ambayo tupate formula ya ndizi. Pale ndani tunaitengeneza nayo tunaisterilize by autoclave ambayo tunasterilize up to 121 degrees centigrade. Tukisafanya hii sterilization tunaweka ile media inaseto, inakaa, tunaweka haga ndio inafanya inasikana, inakaa kama kiugali sasa mahali penye utaweza panda ndizi. Sasa ikiseto tumeosa hii ndizi vizuri pale ndani the growth chamber. Tumemaliza sterilization room, washing room, sterilization room. Sasa tumeingia kwa machine. Mliona sterilizer, hiyo sterilizer ndio sasa tunafanya nini? Hiyo sterilizer sasa ndio tunaweka ile mimea ndani, tunafanya further trimming. Tukitumia forceps, hatugusi ndizi na mchanga na mkono, tunatumia forceps, alafu tunaikata vizuri, tunailevorize, then tunapanda pale kwa ndizi. Tukipanda hiyo stage ya kwanza inaitwa initiation. Sasa kutoka initiation ndio tunaiweka pale kwa bench. Bench sasa inaenda within 4 to 5 weeks tunaipeleka to the next stage. Baka iende stage ya disa ambayo sasa itakuwa ndizi moja ile saka moja itakuwa imeproduce 250 suits of banana. Sasa hapo ndio tunaipeleka pale kwa growth chamber, tunaweka hormone ya rooting, inatoa misisi, ndio sasa tunaitoa tunaileta kwa nursery, tunakuja kupanda karatasi kama hii.
Kwa uelewa wetu tunaona kwamba au kwa faida ya mtazamaji, tuna aina 3 ya ndizi. Kuna ile aina ya plantain, kuna ile ndizi ambayo ni ya kuivisha na kuna ile ya kupika. Na je, ndizi hizi zote kupitia process hii ambayo unatuelezea?
Yes, yeah. Hii teknolojia ya tissue culture ni kuproduce true to type. Yaani ukitaka ndizi itoke exactly vile iko. Unajua sasa uking'oa ina reduce the characteristics of the matter, inatoka kitu kingine tofauti.
Kuna kitu ambacho nimejaribu kusikia watu pale nje wanasema.
Yes.
Je, ndizi hii ya tissue culture iko na tofauti? Kuna watu wanasema kwamba ile ndizi yetu ya Kikisia, ya kiasili ya Kikisia tunaita litoke liagusi. Yes. Yaani kuna ile tofauti ambayo iko nayo wakati unazipika. Wanasema kwamba ile ndizi ya asili ya Kikisii ukipika iko na ikiiva inakuwa rangi ya njano, yani yellow. Alafu na hii nyingine ikiiva bado kuna namna ambavyo inasalia kukaa na ile rangi ya rangi nyeupe ama white kwa kizungu, ambayo tunaona wanasema kwamba alafu pia ile utamu ule uko na utofauti, na umesema kwamba ndizi hizi ina retain the original type. Tofauti ni ipi?
Kawaida haya na hii process ya tissue culture is a process to propagate the banana seedling. Kwa hivyo kama tunataka kutengeneza ile ndizi ya kienyeji, tunatoa suckers from the matter of kienyeji. Sasa tukifanya process hiyo ya rapu, mambo ya sterilization na kuproduce, ni kitu yenye itafanya increase the yield, but itatoka the exact with the same characteristics of the matter.
Kwa hivyo wewe unakosoa wale ambao wanasema hizi ndizi zina tofauti. Kwa hivyo ndizi ambao wale wanakula ni tofauti na hii ambayo yeke. Kwa hivyo ukifanya tissue culture ndizi yeke gusi inatoka
exactly
yeke gusi. Alafu pia kuna tofauti nyingine ambayo inakujia. Wengine husema kwamba ndizi hii ukiila wakati umeivisha, pale katikati huwa ngumu, huwa haivi mpaka ndani katikati, ukitofautisha na ndizi hii nyingine yeke gusi. Kwa hivyo tofauti ni ipi?
Ile ndizi kukaa ngumu katikati ni mambo ya management. Sana unapata wakulima hapa Kisii anatumia fertilizer ya chai kumwagia nini? Kumwagia ndizi. Ile fertilizer ya chai wameweka nitrogen iko juu sababu ya kutoa leaves kwa chai. Sasa ukiweka ile fertilizer ama urea kwa ndizi, obvious pale katikati ndizi itakuwa ngumu, na hata ukivisa unaona inakuwa na machi haraka, inaharibika haraka. Sasa hiyo ni mambo ya management, na management haina sita, tuna advise clients vile wanashughulikia.
Kwa hivyo tuliona kwamba pengine hii karatasi ambayo unaitumia katika upanzi huu wa ndizi hii, tuliona kwamba ni shirika lile la Neema liweza kupiga marufuku utumizi wa karatasi. Lakini nikiangalia karatasi hii ambayo unaitumia wewe, tukiangalia kama mpiga picha wangu akiweza kutuonesha, ni kwamba imeandikwa Ministry of Environment and Forestry. Je, kumaanisha kwamba karatasi hii imeidhinishwa ama unazinunua kutoka kwa wizara?
Makaratasi siku hizi imeidhinishwa. Sababu wakati walipani makaratasi Kenya, ndio the government yenye ilikuwa na the 4 big agendas ya agriculture ikiwa na moja yao ya kuimprove the economy of Kenya. Sasa tuko na association ya nursery ambayo niko vice chairman. Sasa tulienda tukaweza kuuliza, kuna makaratasi walikuwa wameleta hiyo makaratasi itatusaidia ile yenye inahosa haraka. Lakini ile ukiangalia kitu kama macadamia nuts ukiweka kwa nursery mpaka kitambo iwe ready kwenda kwa shamba ni miaka 3. Sasa ile karatasi ikimaliza miezi 4-5 imefanya nini? Imesahoza. Sasa ndio tulikuwa tuna negotiate, lakini tulielewana, wakakubaliana ile nursery itakubaliwa kupanda kutumia makaratasi, lakini just only for planting seedlings.
Sasa wewe kama ulivyoamua kuingilia, kwa sababu tunajua kwamba eneo hili la Gusii zima kuna ukulima wa aina nyingi na limejulikana kwa sababu ya upanzi wa ndizi. Wakulima wengi waliamua kujiondoa katika ukulima huu wa ndizi, lakini wewe wakati niliangalia katika shamba lako lile liko pale eneo la Mosocho, liko na zaidi ya ndizi 1400. Kwa nini wewe kimekuweza kukuweka bado mpaka wakati huu umeshikililia ukulima huu wa ndizi?
Ukulima kwa ndizi si mbaya, ni ukulima mzuri ambayo itakusaidia uweze kuchenga vizuri, watoto waende shule vizuri, na familia mkae vizuri kuchenga na mambo yote. Ndizi ukimanage vizuri, ndizi inatumika for pot dessert and cooking. Kumaanisha ukiwa na ndizi uwezi lala njaa. Ukiwa na ndizi uwezi ngangana kununua mikate utatumia kama snacks asubuhi. Ukiwa na ndizi uwezi kosa sabuni ama sukari, sababu utaivisa upeleka pale karibu na kando na shule yenye karibu na wewe uuze ndizi. Sasa ndizi nilianza na 40 stores. Vile nilianza na 40 stores, demand ika increase. Haya, mimi nilianza kuintroduce hii kitu kwa mahoteli, conferences, mahali penye silikuwa, nilienda na ndizi yangu iko smart na introduce pale na wapatia one sample free. Kama wako 200 napeleka 200 fingers na wapatia. Nilikuwa napeleka ATC, nilikuwa napeleka hotels kama ufanisi na zingine. Sasa nikapata demand imeanza ku-increase. Sasa vile demand ina increase na mimi nilikuwa na increase mandisi kwa samba. Hata mandisi yenye niko nayo saizi itatosa demand. Sababu hii ya kuiva ukivisa una add value, ndizi yenye ungeuza shilingi 400 unauza 1300 to 1500.
Wakati umesema hapo kwa add value, pengine ndizi hizi wakati umezipanda kama lile ambalo tunaliona pale nyuma, lile ndizi ambalo liko sawa limejaza pale ndani vizuri.
Yes.
Lile linakuwa kama shilingi ngapi?
Hii kawaida average liki kama vizuri itakuwa 65 kg. Na ndizi kawaida unachua inatoka 28 shillings per kilo. Sasa hiyo inafaa itoke like 1400. Ukipata na wale wanunuzi wazuri. Lakini ukiuza ile tunaita kuangalia na macho hivi alafu nauza hapa Kisii inatoka shilingi 700. Lakini hii ndizi inakanga na 240 fingers. Hii ndizi ukivisa vizuri siku hizi hapa Kisii mandizi inatoka mandizi 3 20 shillings. Kumaanisha one finger is more than 5 shillings, is 7 shillings. Na iko na 240 fingers. Sasa ukivisa hiyo ndizi bado ukipeleka pale kwa soko unapata vizuri. Lakini mimi kitu yenye nafanya niko na ripening chamber. Natoa mandizi kwa samba kwa wingi na kucha na live within 3 days mandizi imeiva naturally without using the chemicals because iko ripening chamber in temperature tunailase. Ikiiva sasa vioski na vipanda vyote yenye iko karibu hapa wanakuja wanachukua mandizi kutoka hapa sipeleke kwa soko. Wanachukua kutoka hapa na wafanyia 5 shillings per finger ndio wanaenda kuuza 7 shillings. Wanapata pesa yao na mimi napata yangu.
Sasa kuna yule ambaye anajiuliza hizi ndizi za kuivisha ziko na aina ngapi?
Kuna varieties, a lot of varieties. I think senye simekuwa recommended kupandwa hapa Kenya ni 280 varieties. Lakini sasa kuna zile ambayo tumeangalia depending the market ambayo tunapeleka mandizi. Sana sana tunajaribu kuangalia vile tutasupply mandizi ya Kisii to schools. Sababu tukiangalia national schools in Gusii, we have 4 national schools ambayo ziko na watoto more than 15,000. Sasa tukiamua kusupply one finger in 4 national schools tutasupply mandizi 15,000 daily. Tukisupply mandizi 15,000 itakuwa sawa. Sasa ndio maana tunajaribu kuintroduce hii variety ya Israel inaitwa Williams Hybrid, Granite 9, Giant Cavendish na Chinese Cavendish. Hii mandizi uzuri yao finger yake inakuwa mrefu ambayo ina attract mteja, ikiiva inakuwa yellow uniform ambayo ina attract mteja na iko na long shelf life. Ikiiva inakaa sana bila kuharibika. Sasa hii mandizi ndio tunajaribu kupromote. Ndio tukipata njia ya kusupply mandizi kwa zuri sababu nimesupply Sironga, nimesupply Nyahururu, kuna demand lakini tunataka mandizi kwa wingi. Sasa tukifungua hiyo market, hii mandizi ya Israel ukiivisa inamaliza 23 to 25 days without kuharibika. Sasa hii mandizi tukisupply kumaanisha within 3 weeks una supply once alafu sura wanaendelea kukula hiyo mandizi na tunareduce transport cost, time na tuna increase profit.
Pengine kuna mtu ambaye yuko pale nje naye pia anajaribu kujua. Unahisi kwamba wewe zao hili la ndizi ya asili ya Kikisii wakati muda unavyozidi kusonga huenda ikaenda ikipotea, tukue na asili za kigeni peke yake katika eneo hili?
No, ndizi ya Kisii bado iko na high demand. Haya, tumeweza kutembelea wakulima sehemu zingine kama Kirinyaga, Meru, Murang'a, Taita Taveta kuangalia vile wanafanya production ya ndizi. Najua pale hawana maji ya kutosha. Lakini Kisii tuko na mvua ya kutosha. Sasa kumaanisha ndizi ya kupika tutaproduce ambayo itatoka vizuri. Ndio maana unaona mandizi ya Kisii ya kupika inaenda Mombasa, inaenda Nairobi, inaenda Naivasha na Nakuru na sehemu zingine mpaka Kisumu. Kumaanisha haya ile strategic yenye nimeweka as from this year 2024 nataka kuimprove na kuincrease the banana production, cooking banana production ndio tuweze kuread in Kenya. Ukiangalia sasa nimeweka strategic ya kufungua najaribu kutafuta the investors from FL sub-county in Kisii ndio tuweze kufungua pig nursery standard in FL sub-county in Kisii 9 nurseries tuweze kuincrease mandizi iwe closer to farmers. Sababu ukiangalia mkulima mwenye anatoka South Mugirango kufika hapa Kisii ana spend 500 shillings. Hizi 500 shillings angekuwa amenunua extra bananas. Sasa tutaweka nursery South Mugirango, tutaweka hapo Machoge, tutaweka hapo Basi, tutaweka kila mahali Kisii county.
Kwa kweli kwa sababu wakati tuliingia tuliweza kuona kwamba kulikuwa na watu wameweka pale magari, malori wanajaribu kupokea. Pole sana kwa kuweza unajua customer wako pale wanaendelea kungoja. Tukiangalia kwamba kuna mchanga huu ambao ulikuwa bado hujatueleza ambao unatumia katika kupanzi. Ni mchanga ambao unaonekana kwa kweli una utofauti wa aina yake. Kwa nini usichukue mchanga ule wa kawaida ili uweze kupandia ndizi hizi?
Tukiingia horticultural nursery ni nursery ya kufanya biashara na horticulture iko na rules ambazo zimesetiwa, sababu unajua horticulture utapanda ndizi uuse nje ya Kenya. Sasa regulators like hapa HCD na KVS kuna sheria ambayo wameweka za kufuatwa. Ndio tukiusa a seedling nisiusie mkulima magonjwa. Sasa ndio maana ulisikia tukiangalia mambo ya mataproc. Na mchanga utaweza mandizi ambayo umeweka mchanga iko na magonjwa. Kumaanisha utaspread diseases to farms. Sasa KVS na HCD wameweka sheria ambayo zinafuatwa. Na sheria moja ni vile tunachanganya hii mchanga kwa ratio yenye recommended. Tukisa changanya alafu tuna treat, tunafanya sterilization, hii mchanga ndio ikae sawa. Sasa hii mchanga ukiangalia tumefanya sterilization. Nasi hapa tunatumia a simple method of sterilization inaitwa sterilization. Sterilization ni tunafanya aje? Tunatafuta mchanga, tuna mix with the recommended ratio. Tukisa mix recommended ratio, tunaweka hiyo mchanga pamoja, tunaweka karatasi vile umeona tumeweka karatasi hapa. Hii karatasi tunafunika. Sasa jua ikipiga ile heat ina circulate ndani, inaua midudu na nematodes, bacteria zile zenye ziko harmful kwa mimea. Sasa kumaanisha tukikuhusia hapa tunakuhusia a clean planting materials. Mchanga iko sterilized haina magonjwa, mmea iko sterilized haina magonjwa na imekaguliwa. Sasa tunakuhusia kitu clean. Hiyo ndio itafanya biashara tuweze kuendelea kwa muda mrefu.
Kwa hivyo ni swala ambalo wewe kama mkulima ambaye unaendelea na ukulima huu wa ndizi, pengine je, watu wametoka maeneo mengine kutoka magatuzi jirani kuja katika kuweza kupata zao hili la ndizi? Kwa sababu tunajua kwamba ukulima huu wa ndizi unafanyika hasa maeneo kama vile Murang'a, Nyandarua, Nyeri, maeneo ya Meru, wengi pale pia pale ni maeneo ambayo pia yanajulikana kwa upanzi, pia upande wa magharibi ambayo ni kama vile Kakamega. Je, wengine wameweza kufika katika maeneo haya? Kwa sababu pale Nyunje niliona kwamba kuna magari mengi ambayo yanaonekana pia yametoka mbali.
Yes, tunauza mimea ni sehemu mbali. Sababu kitu moja inatusaidia hapa Kisii tuko na mvua, kumaanisha tuna produce the big punch than any other areas in Kenya. Sasa hiyo tukiwa na mataproc ambayo iko maeneo ya Kisii, kumaanisha ile mataproc iko na more potential to produce high yield than any other counties in Kenya. Sasa ndio maana kama mkulima alinunua ndizi kutoka hapa, akipanda anaona imetoka kubwa, imetoka 80 kg above 65 kg, na akinunua maeneo mengine, sababu unajua uking'oa ile saka ina promise to increase 17% more of the yield. Sasa nikitoa kwangu kama nimetoa ndizi iko na 8 kg, ikinikirisi unapata imeenda 93, imeenda 102, kitu kama hiyo. Sasa hiyo ni kama testimonials. Mkulima akitoa ndizi hapa akipanda, normally automatically atapata ndizi yenye ilitoka agro plant imepeana ndizi kubwa kuliko ndizi yenye inatoka sehemu zingine. But kitu yenye inatusaidia nini? Comparative advantage ya Kisii, tuko na mvua kila mara ambayo ina make the banana inakuwa kubwa na mataproc inakuwa na potential ya kuproduce high yield.
Pengine tukiangalia kwamba ndizi tuseme nimetoa sakas kwako.
Yes.
Pengine nimeona nimetoa ndizi kwako. Na nikiangalia ndizi hii nimeitoa moja inatoa sakas. Zile sakas zake je, huwa hutoa ndizi ambayo ni sawia na ile ambayo nilipanda awali?
Ukifanya tissue culture ina increase the yield and production. But uking'oa saka ni kama ng'ombe. Wacha nitumie ng'ombe sababu ng'ombe watu wanaelewa. Ukinunua a breed from Holland, hiyo breed iweka hapa alafu kisa baadaye uipatie ndume ya kienyeji, ina reduce the yield and the characteristics of hybrid. Sasa na ndizi inakanga hivyo. Kwa hivyo ukinunua ndizi, tuseme umenunua ndizi yenye kuna potential to produce more than 65 kg, ukienda uking'oa unapata imekuja 50 something kg, na kutoka pale uking'oa yani inaendelea ku reduce the matter characteristics vile unaendelea kung'oa. Sasa unapata ile ndizi imerudi kama hizi ya kienyeji ambazo tunataka kuimprove kutoka 7 kg. Najua kuna mwandishi mkulima kuna 7 kg amefanya the same management, the same rain na kila kitu amepata the same, lakini anapata 7 kg, na kuna mkulima mwingine anapata 70 kg. Sasa ukipata 70 kg itakusaidia. Ndio maana tuna advise mkulima, wewe hakuna acha kung'oa saka, uendelee ku reduce the yield. Kama utang'oa round 3 tu unaachana, sababu after round 3 itarudi kienyeji tena, itaanza ku reduce small punch. Kwa hivyo kama unaweza nunua seedling, tunauza friendly price. Ukisanunua ukipanda unapata more than 65 kg ambayo itakupatia good income na itakaa sana bila kuseka.
Sasa hii ndizi moja ambayo umeipanda hapo awali, je, hutoa sakas ngapi kwa ambazo uko na uhakika kwamba hizi sakas zitakupea mazao maradufu kabla uweze kununua saka ingine?
Ndizi hii sana sana hizi variety za Israeli zinaendanga up to 20 years. Ndio uweze kupatiliza. Lakini hizi zingine za roko zinaendanga 7 to 8 years ndio ufanye replacement. Kwa hivyo ukikompea, sababu ukipanda saka ikienda miaka 3 imesaeka. Lakini hii tuseme umepata hizi varieties za Israeli ni good management practices. Haya, kuna njia tuna advise client yakinunua ndizi ile simo yenye tunatengeneza na spacing yenye tunafanya iko able to fit one punch at a go. Sasa ukiacha mandisi ikifrawa more than 2 punches inaanza kungangania ile chakula. Unapata mandisi inaenda 5 months from flowering inaichakoma. Kwa maana kwa nini inangangania ile chakula? Lakini ndizi ukipanda tunakuadvise within 2 to 3 months imeanza kutoa suckers. Zile suckers sasa ndio tunafanya selection. Unakuja una select the best sucker ndio sikweza kupaka at maximum 4. Hizi 4 tukifanya selection in every 2 months kumaanisha mandisi yako kwa sample utaenda ku harvest for every 2 to 2.5 months una harvest ndizi. Ndio mandisi iweze kuflower yote sabali moja. Kwa hivyo tunaifanyia family. Ndio ina remain 4 daughters plus the mother 5. Mata ikitoka tunaache ile nyingine unapata imeflower tena tuna select another ya kureplace.
Pengine umesema mambo ya kungangania chakula. Yes. Wakati unafanya upanzi huu wa ndizi, wakati uko na seedlings hizi, je, umbali upi ambao unafaa kupandwa ya ndizi hii na ukue na umbali upi kwenda chini ili ndizi hii iweze kunawiri vyema?
Tuko na 4 types of bananas. No, 3. Kuna short variety, kuna medium variety na kuna tall variety. Sasa ina depend unapanda variety gani, lakini short variety unapanda 3 by 3 meters. But wale watu wenye wanatumia irrigation kufeed the plant through drip line watapanda 2 by 2. Lakini tukisema ile normally ya kungojea mvua na kuwekea manyua na packet kawaida, ile unaweka 3 by 3 meters. Ukiweka 3 by 3 meters, whole preparation unachimba 2 feet by 2 feet cubed. Ukichimba 2 feet cubed, ile topsoil una separate from the subsoil. Ile topsoil ndio tunatumia as the input, tunaweka 2 depes of manure, planting fertilizer tunaweka 250 grams. Unachanganya vizuri, unapanda ndizi yako. Sasa baada ya miezi 5-6 unaongeza manure 1 depe. Sababu ile madini unapata ndizi imefanya nini, imemaliza. Sasa tunaiongezea well decomposed manure ndio uweze kuipatia nguvu kuendelea vizuri. Ndizi ndio iweze kupatia mapato.
Pengine ndizi wakati huwa inakuanga na bunches ngapi?
Ina depend the variety. Kuna variety saisi inaweka a very big bunch. Inatoka 122-127 kg, inaitwa Fia 17. Hiyo Fia 17 inakanga na 17 hands in good management practices. Ile mikono ebisabu inakuwa na 17 hands na finger and moja inakuwa na 32 to 36 fingers. Sasa unapata inakanga na 500 plus fingers. Tuseme kama unapeleka kwa soko ukiuza moja kumaanisha uko na 500 plus 5 shillings.
Wakati tunasema huu ukulima unafanyika hasa wakati mwingi, tunaona kwamba kuna wakulima wengi ambao wengine pia wameamua kujiondoa katika ukulima huu kwa sababu wanasema kwamba ukulima hauleti pesa, hauna kipato, kwa sababu tunaona kwamba hapa katikati mara nyingi ukiangalia kama maeneo yale ya Kiumbu unapataga ukielekea ile barabara Kisii Keroka highway, unaonanga ndizi zimewekwa kando kwa wingi na kuna yule ambaye anazinunua kutoka kwa mkulima analeta. Pengine utuelezee ni kipi ambacho kinaendelea hapa katikati na ni kipi ambacho kinaweza fanyika na serikali ili kusaidia kwamba mkulima huyu aweze kufaidika maradufu kuliko yule ambaye ni middleman pale katikati.
I think Kisii tukijipanga vizuri sana county government itusaidie mambo ya policy itengenezwe vizuri ya kugovern mambo ya ndizi, wa Kisii tutakuwa tajiri. Kwa maana mimi mwenyewe nimeweza kuuza mandizi nikiusia mnunuzi wa Nairobi na nilimfuata pole mpaka wapi, mpaka Nairobi, nikapata ile production, yani the cost ambayo anatumia is very expensive, sababu anakuja kutoka Nairobi mpaka hapa Kisii anaanza kutafuta ndizi. Sababu mimi unapata walikuwa wananipatia like 600-700 shillings per punch. But wakulima wengine nikapata wanawapatia 300 shillings, 400 shillings. Nilikuwa nachunguza ni nini ndio hasa niweze kuangalia kama nitasoro problem. Nikapata anachukua pota. Anaenda mpaka eneo fulani kuchukua ndizi, alafu anapata ndizi 2. Ile pota anailipa kama shilingi 200. na amepata ndizi mbili. Alafu anatumia kichana kwa kumkatia. Ile ndizi inatoka kwa samba inakuja kwa parapara. Anampatia like 50 shillings. Alafu ile ndizi kutoka kwa parapara mpaka ifike kwa main road mahali penye lori itafika. Anapeana like 50 shillings. Sasa hiyo ndizi unapata kitambo itoke kwa samba ifike mahali penye huyu mtu atakuja kufanya loading na lori. Imechukua like 200 shillings. Ndio maana ametoa zile 200 shillings kwa mkulima sababu hiyo ni. Sasa tukijipanga vizuri tuwe na policy. Serikali tupatie correction centers. Tuchue kama ni Keumbu, maeneo yote ya hiyo ward mandisi inakuja Keumbu. Sasa mkulima anajipanga na kuja na ndizi yake Keumbu. Hapo itakuwa rahisi na mkulima atapata pesa yake na price itakuwa sawa. Sababu kwangu wamekuja wamepata mandisi like 400 once. Ndio maana wananipatia 500 shillings sababu lori inakuja paka kwa samba inapangwa, wale vijana wenye amelipa wakamkatia wakaleta hapa wanaleta karibu na inakuwa yote pamoja. Kwa hivyo kutojipanga ndio imetusumbua. Ndio maana tuna advise farmers in Kisii County to form cooperatives. Najua cooperatives are profit making organization. Sasa hapa tutaangalia ni mambo gani ambayo tuta-address tuweze kufanya nini? Tuweze ku-increase the profit of bananas by reducing the production cost. Hii cooperative ikuwa na collection center na itusaidie kuwa na policy. Kama itusaidie kuwa na policy na regulation, mkulima akikata ndizi lazima alete kwa cooperative collection center apime, akipima analipwa na kilo. Sasa hapa wakulima wataanza kungangana kuproduce ndizi to produce high weight ndio iweze kumpatia pesa kubwa. Na hapo tutasaidia kama wakulima tupate pesa ya kutosha.
Umezungumza kuhusu cooperatives kwa sababu sasa hivi kuna kampuni iliyo hapa Kisii ambayo inakusanya hizi ndizi kutoka kwa wakulima. Tuliona kwamba inatengeneza cookies, inatengeneza unga wa uji, inatumia ndizi zile kutengeneza crisps. Pengine unahisi kwamba gatuzi au kaunti hii ya Kisii kwa kuanzisha kiwanda kile cha ndizi, je, kimekuwa na impact katika mkulima eneo hili la Kisii? Kwa sababu wengi wamekuwa wakilia kwamba zao hili linaharibikia, wakati mwingine unakosa mnunuzi pale katika soko.
Bado narudi kwa wakulima, kutojipanga inapatia factory kazi ngumu. Factory ingekuwa ina produce, sababu saizi unapata the owners of factory wana spend a lot of time kutafuta mandizi. Wakienda pale Keumbu wanapata ile mandizi ya Keumbu imesanunuliwa. Sasa hawatanunua sababu inanunuliwa wakifocus market ya Nairobi. Bado wakulima wangekuwa wanajipanga. Wa correct mandizi. Factory ikichua sasa leo nikienda Nyakoi nitapata tani fulani. Nikienda Keumbu nitapata tani fulani. Nikienda Nyamache nitapata tani fulani. Hiyo itatusaidia na itasaidia factory wa concentrate kwa mambo ya production and marketing. Ndio mkulima sasa aweze kupata pesa. Kutojipanga bado inatupatia challenge. Sababu bado nimejaribu kuangalia factory unapata wakati wanataka mandizi ya wana. Kumaanisha lazima wasimamishe kazi waende kutafuta mandizi. Ile yenye ndizi yenye iko karibu mkulima aliuza 2 months ago lakini iko kwa shamba ya mkulima. Sasa ina challenge.
Kuna challenge moja ambayo ulivyozungumza hapa awali. Tunaona siku hizi kwamba wanunuzi wengi au hawa tunawaita brokers hukuja na anaangalia ndizi ikiwa ndogo kabisa wakati haijaweza kuweka zile bunches na analinunua wakati hule. Je, wewe unahisi kwamba ni kumlagai mkulima kwa sababu haujui kwamba ndizi hii uende ikafunguka ikakuwa kubwa? Sasa unapata mkulima anaiuza pengine shilingi 200 na baadaye wakati ndizi ile inakomaa mkulima anakuja kugundua kwamba kweli ndizi hii hapana niliuza vibaya. Je, unaona kikwazo hiki
inatusumbua sana? That's why tunajaribu kufundisha wakulima sana. Ndio uangalie the production cost of banana. Mimi ukikuja kwangu already niko na production banana, ni production cost ya banana. Na mimi nikiweka already, najua mkulima ajui kama ile samba yenye ndizi inatoka, ile samba inafaa imulipe. Ajui ile kazi yenye alifanya kwa ile ndizi inafaa ajilipe. Sasa yeye anauza ndizi tu. Lakini tunajaribu kufundisha mkulima. Hii ukulima wa ndizi ni biashara. Ukipanda ndizi, the production cost ulinunua the seedling pesa fulani, kumanage manure ukaweka twice a year ina cost pesa fulani, na hii ndizi within a year utakuwa umeharvest na itakuwa imetengeneza pesa fulani. Na ukimanage vizuri una produce good yield. Sasa mkulima akielewa mambo ya production cost hawezi tupa ndizi yake na 200. Sababu labda ndizi normally ukimanage ndizi vizuri una spend 208 shillings per a punch ndio iweze kuwa a punch ambayo iko na more than 65 kg. Na hii ndizi yenye umetumia 208 shillings inafaa uuse more than 800 shillings. Sasa mkulima akielewa hivyo atachua nimespend 208 shillings na nikienda kuuza nauza shilingi 800. Kwa hivyo inafaa nipate shilingi 500 faida, sababu hii shilingi 20 ni ya cess. Sasa mkulima akielewa hivyo, anachua ndizi yangu ni shilingi 500. Kama nimepanda mandizi fulani, ataweza project, nitapata school fees, nitajenga, nitafanya kitu. Kwa hivyo kitu yenye wakulima wamekosa ni information.
Kwa hivyo unasema kwamba Wizara ya Ukulima katika gatuzi au county inafaa kufanya uhamasisho wa kipekee katika wakulima mbalimbali ili waweze kujua namna ambavyo mkulima huyu ataweza kuuza ile bidhaa yake pale kutoka mashinani pale shambani kabla ifikie mnunuzi ule wakabili. Pengine tunaona eneo hili la Kisii ni eneo la mvua. Na pengine je, wakati hakuna mvua na umeamua kupanda ndizi, utafanyaje?
Kisii hatukosi mvua sana, but like the year 2021 it affect sababu mvua ilienda December na ikakuja end of April. It affect sana sasa kama sisi kwa kulima kwa ndizi. But sasa kitu yenye tuligundua na Kisii nao ukichimba kisima uendi bali. Kisima una spend like 15,000 na ni kitu ambayo itakaa forever, ama 20,000 ama 30,000 depending uko sehemu gani na depth gani. Sasa tuna advise wakulima wawe na permanent source of water. Wale wenye karibu na river tunawaambia toa program usipale karibu na samba, panda ndizi ndio uweze kutumia ile maji kuirrigate wa banana, kwa sababu tajiri wa banana ina depend mambo ya maji na manyua. Sababu ukiangalia the seed stem hiyo mti yenye na pepa ndizi, hiyo seed stem 90% is water. Mna seed stem ikipata enough water inakuwa nono, ikiwa nono inakuwa able to carry enough and a good bunch of banana. Kwa hivyo manchi nayo tuangalie mahali penye na panda ndizi, uangalie kuna permanent source of water just in case mvua ikikosa, sababu siku hizi tuko na effect ya climate change. Utafanyaje? Sana Kisii tunakanga na mvua nyingi. Kuna kitu yenye tunafanya iganakanga very simple. Unachimba simo, unaweka tamuraina. Hiyo maji ikiingia pale katikati ya ndizi umeweka mtaro, maji meteremko, umeweka tamuraina, hapo sasa wanakuanga na maji. Na kitambo hiyo tamuraina maji is depending the capacity of your samba, utapata mvua nyingine imenyesha tena maji meteremka imeingia pale. Kwa hivyo kuna mbinu kadhaa tutaweza tumika to harvest water, ama tupande karibu na mto tuwe na permanent source of water ndio tuweze kupata maji ya kuwekea mandizi ya kuirrigate banana, ndio tuweze kuproduce a good punch throughout the year.
Pengine kutuelezea changamoto ambazo wewe kama mkulima unapitia kama mkulima kwanza, changamoto ambazo unapitia katika upanzi huu wa ndizi.
Changamoto zenye tunapitia, number 1 ni kutojipanga. Sababu vile tumetoka nje tumepata wakulima haya ni companies ambazo zinahitaji mandizi kwa wingi. Like kuna company inaitwa Twiga Foods. Twiga Foods wako na a very big go down Kisumu ambayo inanunua fruits na yote ya agriculture. Alafu ndio wana distribute kwa hospitals, schools, supermarkets na nini. Sasa hiyo ni opportunity ambayo tungetumika hapa Kisii. Lakini wakati niliwaambia wakuje Kisii kununua mandizi, ilikuwa inawachukua like 2-3 days kutafuta mandizi ndio ichairabuli. Lakini wakipiga simu from Kisumu Kirinyaga ama Murang'a, within 1 day lori imejaa. Sasa walikuwa na prefer kuenda pale, sababu within a week wataenda 3 to 4 times compared na Kisii hata kama tuko karibu, sababu watakuja watembee kwa masamba watafute ndizi tena wakoze isichae gari.
Kwa hivyo ni kusema kwamba baadhi kitu ambacho kinawazuia ni kwamba ndizi hizi zinanunuliwa mapema na brokers ambao wanataka kujisaidia wao. Kwa hivyo inanyima opportunity kwa mkulima ili kuweza kujiendeleza.
Kabisa.
Tatizo lingine?
Tatizo lingine ni mambo ya haya. Tukiangalia policy nao inatuchanganya. Sababu policy ingekuwa imewekwa ndizi kiwango fulani, hiyo ni mambo ya county government. Ndizi kiwango fulani inatoka pesa fulani. Waweke standard mesa ya kuuza banana iwe mambo ya kilo. Hapo ingetusaidia. Sababu hata broker akikuja atafuata ile policy ya Kisii. Kuchua ya kwamba nikienda Kisii kilo moja inatoka 18 shillings 20 shillings per banana. Sasa hiyo itatusaidia wakulima, tena itasaidia wakulima ku increase the yield. Sababu the more you produce big punch, the more you get money. Sasa itatusaidia. Kwa hiyo ni challenge nyingine kubwa ni policy ambayo serikali itusaidie, county government itengeneze policy ya kugovern bananas, ndio tuweze kuuza kwa standard mesa.
Yeah. Pengine mkulima ambaye anataka kufanya small scale farming ya ndizi, ni which kinds of varieties ambazo anafaa kupanda?
Number 1, mambo ya horticulture tunaambia mkulima anzie kwa soko. Najua horticulture ni kitu ambayo ikiifa within a week imeharibika. Kwa hivyo lazima ujipange na soko, ujue hii kitu nikienda kupanda kabla utengeneza budget, ujue soko ni sababu ukitengeneza budget unajua soko yako. Soko yangu ni Kisumu, ni Nairobi, ni Tharaka Mbili, ni Nyakoe, ni Keumbu. Namba 1 unaanzia soko. Ndio soko ujue ni priority gani ambayo inaenda sana. Kama ni soko ya kupeleka kama shule, hospitali na nini, hapo obviously wanataka live banana ambayo inachukua long shelf life. Kama ni soko kama mahoteli na vipanda, hapo wanachukua ndizi ya kupika. Ujue soko yangu ni ya kupika na lazima ni vipanda ni ya kupika na lazima nichukue ya kupika. Kwa hivyo kitu yenye mkulima inafaa ansie ni soko. Ukichua soko yako ni gani, inafaa kuiviza. Utafute techniques za kutengeneza lepeng chamba, kuiviza mandizi naturally without using chemicals, ndio tuweze kuwauzia. Sasa ukisachua hivyo, sasa ndio unakuja unachua ni kipanda variety fulani. Sana sana kuna potential and opportunity ya kuuza mandizi ya kuiva hapa Kisii na potential iko kwa Sule. Lakini sasa tumesahau sababu hiyo soko ni kama iko hidden, ijaonekana. Tumeisahau. Lakini tukifocus mambo ya Sule, kuna high demand of bananas. Na Sura wana ni mambo ya complaining pageni finger moja ni 7 shillings to 10 shillings. Kwa hivyo mkulima akijipanga, una produce ndizi yako, unakuwa na many fingers, yani unachua ni ndizi gani inatoa many fingers. Hii many fingers sababu na focus market. Ni ndizi gani inatoa biti kubwa. Sababu focus yangu ni kuuza kwa kilo. Ni soko gani ambayo inapenda ndizi ya kupiga. Sababu focus yangu ni ndizi ya kupiga. Ukichua hivyo sasa ndio ukiingia kwa samba already umechua soko yangu ni mahali fulani na kitu yenye wanataka ndio hii. Hiyo itatusaidia.
Tukiangalia je, kuna hii ukulima wa mseto. Yaani uje unaweza panda mandizi ukiwa umechanganya mahindi, maharagwe pale katikati.
Hiyo nayo ina challenge sana. Aya, ndizi inakuwa recommended upande kitu kama maharagwe na mboga within 4 months. After 4 months mandizi imeset the ground. Sasa hapo ukisa weka vitu mahindi na nini, hapo na rules. Because mahindi haipati chakula ya kutosha because ina compete na ndizi. Na ndizi iwezi pata chakula ya kutosha because ina compete na mahindi. Muisoe mahindi yenye ungefuna gunia 3 unafuna ni kebe 10. Na ndizi yenye ungepata average of 65 kg unapata kilo 10. Kwa hivyo hiyo kitu haifai. Sababu ile spacing yenye tumefanya kwa ndizi, tumeangalia the potential ya ile mchanga na chakula yenye iko pale, ndizi itarusa mizizi. Unajua ndizi ni shallow root plant. Inatafuta chakula hapa juu na maji. Sasa ukiweka hivi vitu vingine inanyang'anya chakula, inanyang'anya maji, mwisho unaruhusi. Kwa hivyo mandizi unapanda kitu yenye inaitwa vegetables, onions, vitu kama hiyo, maharagwe within 4 months. After hapo utaacha ndizi kaipigwa, ijisimamie ndio ikupatie faida.
Sasa je, ukiangalia kwamba taifa jirani la Uganda ndilo ambalo pia linasemekana kwamba ndilo linajishughulisha katika upanzi wa ndizi. Je, ukiangalia ukulima huu wa ndizi katika taifa jirani la Uganda na taifa hili la Kenya, je, unawezaje linganisha tani zile ambazo tunatoa kama kizao lipo vipi?
Tani hatuwezi fikia Uganda sababu Uganda unachua number 1 waliweka sheria ya kukura ndizi kwanza. Nimefanya kazi pale Uganda sana nikienda kupandia mandizi, avocado na vitu vingine. Ukiwa pale breakfast ikikucha lazima kuna ndizi. Lunch ikikucha nyama imechanganywa na ndizi. Sapa ukipata unapata, unajua sapa pale wanakaanga tofauti na hapa Kenya. Sawa, sapa ndio naletewa kachai kikombe moja, snacks ambayo imeiva ya ndizi na kitu kidogo tu. Sasa kumaanisha asubuhi ulikula ndizi, mchana ulikula ndizi, jioni unakula ndizi, na kama kuna wengine wanatembea street utakula ndizi ya kuiva. Kwa hivyo na Uganda yenyewe ina consume a lot of bananas. Where by Kisii uwezi kula ndizi useme nimekula lunch. Kumaanisha number 1 Uganda ina produce a lot of bananas sababu wao wenyewe consume. Na wakiconsume more bananas sababu najua Uganda niligundua wakati nilikuwa pale kusiaga mahindi. Bei ya kusiaga inakanga expensive utanikununua. Sababu wanatoa ile kanaitwa kale
kangozi kanje.
Wanatoa ngozi ya nje na ile kitu ya ndani ile kajiro kale
kaplumul.
Wanakatoa sasa wanapaki ingine kwa kama mchere. Sasa kufanya hiyo process yote inakaa expensive kuliko kununua mahindi. Sasa unapata watu pale hawakuli a lot of food, chakula, urani ugali. Sababu inakaa expensive to produce ugali tani ndizi.
Sasa wanasema kwamba policy ya pale lazima wafanye hiyo process yote. It's one way ya kuprevent watu wasikule mahindi, wakule
ndizi. Yes. Hiyo sasa ndio imefanya. Sasa pale demand already, wewe mwenyewe ni demand. Kumaanisha kitu yenye utafanya ya kwanza because ndizi is very cheap to manage. Utapanda ndizi ndio reduce gharama ya kununua. Kwa hivyo Kisii tena tukiwa na policy. Number 1 masule yote iko Kisii sababu the best fruit ni Kisii ambayo inajulikana mpaka ukiangalia mahali popote ukipepa ndizi hiyo inajulikana wewe ni Mkisii. Shule zote za Kisii tuwe na policy ya kusema fruits yenye wanakula ni ndizi. Hizi shule zenye ziko under the county iweke policy ya kusema hizi inaitwa ECD. Hizo za lower classes. Waweka policy ya kusema au watoto wanakula ndizi. Alafu ni hospitals siko under county government waweke sote fruits yenye wanakula ni ndizi. Kumaanisha county government yenyewe itafungua soko. Na ikifungua soko pale na watengeneza a good strategic plan, itimaanisha kwa corrected inakuja correction point na sales ni kiwango fulani. Already government inapata sales ya kufanya pesa wanunue fruits kwa kwenda nini. Sasa hapo tutachinua wenyewe. Mkulima atapata pesa ya kutosha, mkulima akosoa off the market na mkulima anajua ndizi yangu nikipeleka collection center nitapima nitapata pesa fulani.
Je, unahisi kwamba serikali ikiweza ilete favorable conditions ambapo kutakuwa na ina motivate watu kuleta factories katika eneo hili kama eneo la Uganda ku buy products za ndizi zikipromote. Je, itaisaidia katika ukulima huu wa ndizi?
Kabisa, na pesa itakuwa Kisii na Wakisii wataenjoy kilimo ya ndizi.
Tukiangalia pa Kisii tuliona kwamba kuna kampuni moja ya Sovita Wines ya kutengeneza wines. Na pale juu katika ile kampuni ile ya county government, ile ya Boka ambayo inatengeneza juices na nini. Ni kipi kile ambacho unaona kwamba serikali ikiweza kufanya itaimarisha kutengeneza kwa by products zile nyingi za ndizi na kufanya uhamasisho kwa watu kuweza kununua vitu hivi?
Ni serikali ichiunganishe na national government. Kwa sababu unajua tukiongea mambo ya kutafuta international market, hapo ni national government. County government work very close with the national government, cooperatives, Ministry of Cooperative, ndio waweze kutafutia soko nje ya products. Sababu tukikutana hii mikutano international meetings, tunapata conference, tunapata kitu kubwa ambayo watu wanasema hii kitu iko na hii demand, tutafanyaje ifike mahali fulani. Sasa kumaanisha work very close with the Ministry of Cooperative and the national government watafute soko nje. Tutakuwa na soko kubwa ya mandizi, na tukiwa na soko ambayo iko na swalid, wakulima wa Kisii na wajua ni watu wa bidii watapanda mandizi kwa wingi. Kumaanisha sasa tutengeneza pale soko. Na hiyo kitu inatusaidia ni county government plus national government and the Ministry of Cooperative. Ndio tuweze kupata policy rules nzuri ambayo zitaguide mambo ya banana from kupanda mpaka na mambo itakuwa sawa.
Tunaona kwamba kuna ile factory ya Boka pale juu. Kama ulivyosema, ile factory ya Boka inatengeneza juice, inatengeneza unga wa uji ambao watu wengi wanapenda sana, watoto hasa watoto wachanga wanakuwa advised. Hiyo ni one policy yenye pia tuliona pia Kisii county government ina advise the mothers wenye wanajisaidia. Na tunaona kwamba kuna hiyo processing. What do you think that the government should do ku advise farmers waache kuuza hizi ndizi zao kwa brokers hao wenye wanaenda nje na kufacilitate that company stabilize ili iweze kufungua other mini branches as they come?
Hapo ni rahisi. County government ikichukua hiyo kitu ni rahisi. Iko na enforcement. Ukisikia wakati walisema eti potapota isipite pale nini? Potapota ndio tunachua kuna kichwa ngumu, lakini serious stop hawakupita. Kumaanisha wakiweka policy na wako na enforcement, hiyo enforcement itatumwa. Siku hizi huwezi chenga hata choo kama utafanya nini kama una ile approval ya county. Kwa nini? Kuna watu wa enforcement. Kwa hivyo wakiweka policy na waweke hiyo enforcement ifuate isukume hiyo policy, mambo itakuwa sawa. Eti ukipatikana ukiuza ndizi kwa samba kama ichakoma utafuatwa. Ukiuza ndizi kama ichachukuliwa sesi itafanya nini? Sasa hiyo itatusaidia sana na mambo itakuwa sawa.
Je, unahisi ujio wa industrial parks, kwa sababu tunaona kuna industrial parks Ironga, kuna ile nyingine kwa upande wa Kisii kule ukielekea kama unaelekea Kilgori, Kenyenya. Je, industrial park itasaidia katika kuinua ukulima huu wa ndizi?
Kabisa. Kitu yenye industrial park itatusaidia aje? Leaders wetu wakifocus. Sababu hiyo industrial park unajua itaweza kuwa na mambo ya packages ya international market. Kumaanisha tukipackage sasa, mkulima akiwa na a package in industrial park ambayo unakubaliwa, ukienda pale unalipa fee fulani, unapaki vitu yako unapeleka ngambo, inakuanga easier. Sasa hata mimi mwenyewe ningekuwa naenda pale industrial park na paki ndizi yangu vizuri, inaenda ngambo. Kuna mashini ambayo unafanya, kuna mashini ambayo inapaki ndizi inakaa 4 months without kuharibika. Inatoa peel, alafu ina package vacuum pack, mandizi inaenda ngambo bila kufanya nini, bila kuharibika. Sasa hiyo industrial park ikikuja, leaders wamesema sisi industrial park ya Kisii tunataka ipaki mambo ya complete value chain inipanana, itakuwa sawa na tutapeleka vitu yetu vizuri. Kwa hiyo industrial park is good na itatusaidia na mambo itakuwa sawa.
Pengine ukiangalia umesema industrial park itasaidia katika ukulima huu, na kuna baadhi, je, uhisi kwamba wakulima watakuwa wanaona kwamba kupeleka hizi ndizi, kwa sababu tukiona hizi umbali wa hizi industrial park watakuwa wanahisi kwamba kuna uzito pengine wa kusafirisha?
Unajua industrial park haitakuwa na uzito, sababu sahizi nikitaka kuexport avocado ama passion fruit ama vegetables, the closest pack house iko Limuru. Sasa kama watu wanafaulu kupeleka Limuru, Chucha, hapo airport, hapo APZ, wanapeleka kupaka, kumaliza kikucha Kisii, kama niko na passion zangu itakuwa rahisi, naenda pale na pack, nafuata zile standards, naweka mzigo wangu kwa container, kama ni kwenda kwa Mary inaenda Mombasa, kama ni kwenda kwa ndege inaenda rahisi. Kwa hivyo ikikucha Kisii itatusaidia sana, sababu the growth ni pack house hizi ni Limuru. Kama Limuru inafanya kazi, Kisii itafanya vizuri zaidi.
Naam, asante sana. Huyu ni mkulima. Kwa hivyo je, una advice, maneno yako ya mwisho kwa mkulima ambaye ama mtu ambaye anataka kujihusisha na ukulima huu wa ndizi?
Ukulima wa ndizi ni ukulima iko na pesa, lakini kitu yenye watu hawajachua kutengeneza ndizi mpaka iwe to sell inachukua pesa ngapi? Inachukua 300 shillings, na ukiset the price inafaa uuse more than 800 shillings ndio uweze kupata faida. Ukulima wa ndizi itainua watu, sababu mimi mwenyewe ni testimony, imeniinua, imenitoa chini mpaka sasa nimefika, watoto wanasoma vizuri, tunakula vizuri na tumechenga vizuri. Kwa hivyo tukimbilie mandizi ya ukulima wa ndizi na kucheni hapa tuwafundishe jinsi ya ukulima wa ndizi na uweze kuproduce good yield ili tuendeleze kilimo ya ndizi kama biashara.
Na je, mtu ambaye anataka kununua hizi ndizi atakuwa ana gauge aje katika hali ya kununua hizi ndizi different types?
Ukikuja nitakuelezea mambo ya soko, lakini nikwambia wewe mwenyewe utafanya market research. Soko ndio inakusaidia unachua ni variety gani. Sasa ukichua mambo ya soko, ukikuja kwangu nitakueleza hiyo that kind of market ndizi yenye itakusaidia ni hii variety ndio itafanya vizuri zaidi. Kwa hivyo hii ina sita, knowledge tunayo na information tunayo, kucheni tusaidiane ili iweze kuimprove kilimo ya banana.
Naam, asante sana mpenzi mtazamaji wa Runinga TV 47. Na sasa siku hii ya leo tumeweza kupata maarifa au uhamasisho au vile vile mafunzo mengi kuhusiana na namna ndizi inazidi kuwa kutoka mahabara mpaka wakati ambapo inawekwa hapa ndizi hii mpaka wakati inakuwa hivi mpaka mwishowe tunapata zao lile la ndizi. Kwa hivyo natumai kwamba baada ya kipindi hiki wewe kama msikilizaji au mtazamaji wetu umeweza kujifundisha mengi na kujifahamisha mengi kuhusiana na kilimo hiki cha ndizi, manufaa yake, na pia vile vile umeweza kujifunza ni kipi kile ambacho sio lazima uweze kuwa na shamba kubwa au ekari kubwa ili uweze kufanya ukulima huu wa ndizi. Pia kale kasehemu kako kadogo ambako uko nako 100 by 50 pia unaweza kufanya ukulima huu wa ndizi pasi na tashwishi yoyote. Sina la ziada ila kurudisha upande wako studioni Stanley Nyaringita.
A number of small-scale farmers are asking around here, including me, a very huge interest in matters matoke. If I was to plant hiyo banana tree moja, inaweza toa bunch ngapi ndizi? Labda inaweza tuambie hiyo kabla tufunge.
Pengine kabla tuweze kufunga, kuna mtazamaji wetu ameuliza, je, ndizi ile moja ambao kama mtu anataka tu kupanda yake moja hivi inaweza toa kama sakas ngapi hivi na inaweza mpatia kama faida vipi?
Ndizi moja ukimanage vizuri inafaa ikupatie 4,000 annually. 4,000 at least. Hiyo sasa ni ile umeushia kwa samba. But if you want value, very simple value addition ni kama kuivisa na kuuza, itakupatia 9,800.
Na zile sakas zitatoa kama ngapi?
Sakas tunafaa kufanyia family. Inafaa unaacha 5 at maximum. Siwe less than 5 ndio uweze kuproduce big punch na iweze kukaa sana bila kuzeeka.
Na pengine umeweza kupata hilo Stanley Nyaringita. Ametueleza kwamba kama wewe ungependa kuweka pale kasehemu kako pale mjini ndizi moja, ukifanya vizuri itakupatia shilingi kama 4,000 kwa mwaka. Na ukiamua kufanya value addition uweze kuivisha ndizi zile au kuweza kufanya ile kupishi wa kuuza, itakupatia shilingi 9,500 kwa mwaka. Kwa hivyo Stanley, na kuadvise kuja chukua seedling moja kama hii, uende upande na utakuwa unapata shilingi 9,000 zako ukiuza ndizi za kuiva. Ukiamua kama ndizi kuuza ndizi tu ile bila kuivisha, utakuwa unapata 4,000. Kwa hivyo naona hutakuwa unakosa kipato. Kwa hivyo naona ni njia moja tu ya kusaidia vijana waweze kusema hakuna sisi hakuna kazi. Kuna kazi, wapande ndizi na kipato kipo.
Sana Alfayo Kombo, and as you've rightfully said, I'm not coming for the seedling. First of all, I'll come for the matoke and all that. Asante sana Alfayo Kombo, just giving us hizo tips zote za banana farming in case you're not only even in Kisii but any part of the country, as he was giving